which is required under state law to have this public hearing 14 days out or so from our May 19th vote on the budget. And so I'll call that to order right now. Resolve the Irvington Board of Education calls to order the public hearing for the 15-16 budget. And we don't have to have a motion on that or anything. To remind everybody, as part of our public hearing, that our budget was approved, I think it was April 21, and it was a 5-0 vote, and it was in the amount of $57,664,000.
I think it was only 4-0, by the way.
Did you abstain?
No, I don't think all members were here.
That is correct. Thank you. Right, we had four. Thanks, John. 4-0 because we were missing one person. With a 2.43% increase budget to budget. So if there's any comments from the community on this budget, now is the time to make them. Otherwise, we will move on in our agenda and close our public hearing. All right, thank you. Great. Now it's time to close our public hearing. Thank you very much. Okay, and now I'll call to order our regular meeting.
We need a motion to close.
Do we need a motion to close? I thought.
Yes.
Motion to close. May I have a motion to close our public hearing, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so now we will open our regular meeting. So I'll call to order, and we'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance, as always. Do I need a motion to, I don't need a motion to call to order our regular meeting, right?
Motion to reconvene.
To reconvene?
Yes, it says, yes, a resolve. So, yes,
Okay.
please ask for a motion.
Okay, may I have a motion, please, to reconvene for our
So
regular meeting? All in favor? Aye. Now our Pledge of Allegiance.
We object.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So again, we have an abbreviated quantity of board members. We are down to 3 tonight. Bob is yet again working on another sizable real estate deal, so we are missing him, and Maria is dealing with a family matter. So we are down to 3 board members tonight, but 3 fully dedicated and present board members. So we will begin with our motion to accept our agenda. May I have that motion, please?
So moved.
John?
Second, but can we discuss?
Oh, so you'd like to discuss something in the agenda?
Yeah, we have, I'm assuming, do we want to move up the period for comments in case there are any? 'Cause I know we
It's
have people
actually,
here.
it is actually already up,
It is.
6.1.
Oh,
We will,
okay. Was
Okay.
it already changed, or did it just?
we had, coincidentally, it was already there.
Coincidentally, okay.
Okay.
All right, good.
All in,
Those are my comments.
yes, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the agenda has been accepted, and we move on to our superintendent's report.
Very good. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. A few items to report on, and 2 of the items I just kind of, in my own notes, have titled SED's Madness. It's been a crazy week. They like to send lots of memos out, and last week we received 2 that were of certain interest, and one you may begin reading about in the newspapers that SED has proudly announced that they are going to release instructional reports by July 1st, which means that they are going to be providing school districts with the student test score results by July 1. In their memo, they really promoted this early release because it would provide schools with the opportunity to provide professional development and perform the curriculum work as related to the student performance on the test. Some obvious missing links, once again, for SED, and the fact that There really isn't any access to our faculty during the summer. That plans are certainly made well in advance of that. That we don't have access to the actual questions at that point in time, because they're saying that 50% of those questions will be released at the end of the summer. So looking at data in isolation of understanding the nature of the questions that the children may have done well with or struggled with is really a missing link. We see this really as a political play on their part. Certainly some glimpses at the data early will be helpful, but we still need that greater context. And 50% of the questions are helpful, but it's not the answer. So it seems that they're starting to move in the right direction, but we're not seeing any resolve with this step that they're taking. Also, last week, I would say approximately Tuesday, a memo came to superintendents from SED indicating that there was going to be a windfall of monies that were going to trickle down to school districts through federal Race to the Top funds. And the intent of these monies were going to be to purchase student devices. All districts in the state would have access to this money, whether we were accepting Race to the Top funds or not, which, that was obviously the first thing that I was curious about. So they did advise that there was going to need to be a quick turnaround for them to be able to meet federal requirements for spending of this money. So on Friday, we received all kinds of correspondence from SED and from our RIC indicating that we had to respond to this opportunity by noon today, and gave us a list of materials from which we could make choices. We recognized that we had approximately $9,600 to spend on devices, and in doing so, we were able to secure an additional 34 Chromebooks to supplement our inventory. But we don't know when they're going to arrive. We submitted the paperwork through the RIC as we were required to do. But one thing that we do need to note is that it will give us the devices. But from a district standpoint, we're still going to need to utilize district funds to purchase charging stations, whether that's like buckets to store them in that charge them, or another cart. And we'll also have to buy software, like management software, so we can control them throughout the district at about $30 a unit. So we're looking at another few $1,000s of an investment.
Including the carts and everything?
$3,000 to $4,000 probably in that range of district funds to be able to take full advantage of the 34 Chromebooks that we're going to receive. So certainly some good news. They certainly would have also liked some more time and to be able to respond accordingly, but it's SED. So two little tidbits of good news, but certainly not all ideal.
Just on the Chromebooks, I'm just curious. I mean, you could send me this later, you wouldn't have this here, but I'm just curious now, like, do we have a total somewhere of like how many Chromebooks we have in the district? And can we get that information? Like how many we're buying based on this budget and based on the new edition, and then how many we have in the district? Thanks.
And we went through that in the budget discussion.
I know,
right?
but now that he said this, it just kind of triggered again.
Of course. I want to acknowledge Kiana Lee, one of our star track athletes who holds many school, county, and section records, who recently signed a letter of intent to attend the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. We're certainly proud of Kiana and her accomplishments and wish her the best of luck, and we look forward to hearing about her success at the collegiate level. I also want to acknowledge 5 of our middle school students who competed in the New York State You Be the Chemist Challenge, which is sponsored by BASF. The students qualified for a competition based on their performance in a regional competition in March. This competition took place at BASF's Terrytown location, where the kids were participating in a variety of challenging chemistry and physics challenges. And we're thrilled that our kids did very well, with 2 of them receiving some great recognition. On the team, we had 6th grader Henry Demers, 7th grader Rishit Gupta, Ayushi Ya is an 8th grader, and 7th grader Rishi Matabushi, and 7th grader Zachary Rossman. They did exceptionally well, and we're proud to announce that Rishi finished as the second runner-up, third in the state, and Henry was the first runner-up, second in the state. So certainly congratulations to them, and maybe Mr. Sotile, we can make some arrangements for them to come forward and be honored at a future meeting. Certainly proud of their accomplishment.
Yeah, I also heard that there were 8 kids that this area sent, and so 5 of the 8 were from our school, which was unbelievable. It's really great.
Yeah, it's certainly an exciting experience for our kids and for our school. A couple other little things that I would like to reference. Many folks are familiar with the My School Bucks account that we have in the district, where you can make deposits into your child's lunch account, use a credit card, debit card. We are now expanding that service to permit families to be able to use that service to pay for certain school expenses, such as the school prom and other items. So we're going to begin to roll that out more, and hopefully it's a convenience that is appreciated by our community. I would like Ms. Miller to talk briefly about an Irvington Green Policy Task Force initiative that the district is looking to collaborate with them on. So you want to take a second just to give a little update?
We were approached by them because in collaboration with the village and the school district, the Green Committee is going to apply for a NYSERDA grant for $100,000 to start a feasibility study for secondary backup generators or solar for the village and all necessary services like ambulances and police, et cetera, in school districts. There is no cost to the district right now. There will not be. I have been assured of that. We just had to sign the paperwork that we were agreeing to go forth with applying for this grant for the $100,000 feasibility. If they do get that grant money, then they can do the feasibility study. The second stage then would be, if it's feasible for our village to have generators and solar, whatever, then they would apply for another grant through NYSERDA, where then they would be eligible for up to $1 million to install this system. But that's, as I've been told, a little ways down the road.
Yes.
So I think the bottom line is that we're a supporting government agency in the community that endorses their effort. And, you know, it could only bring positive resources
Correct.
to a community that really struggles in bad storms. So we wish the task force and the village luck on this initiative. Another item that I did want to touch on is that last night we learned of some rumors circulating in the high school community about our Latin program. And those rumors focused on the possibility of the program either being cut or difficulties that students potentially might have been having enrolling for the program beginning in 9th grade. You know, I think first I want to say that we certainly value and fully support the program, its students, and of course its teachers. However, there appears to be some misunderstandings that I think are important to be able to speak to at this moment. So I want to invite Dr. Kaur and the high school administration, as appropriate, to share some of the details about what the situation is around Latin, to be able to provide a general understanding for the board and for the public. So, Dr. Kaur?
Sure. So we had I'm not sure that I even have all the rumors straight, but there seems to be some thought out there that somehow the administration and the Board of Education is not in support of our Latin program. And needless to say, I was really surprised to hear that, because I think we've actually always supported and actually appreciate the good work of our teachers and the program and our student interest in it. So Dave and I and Deb had a chance to talk about this, and the piece that I'll share is just where I think it's seated in, and I think then Dave can speak to what the reality of it is. So there's a perception out there that because of the freshman writing course, as well as health being recommended for 9th graders, there's a perception that students can't fit Latin into their schedules. And it would be accurate to say there are limitations because there's just so many periods in the day, but it certainly does not, in no way do we preclude students from taking Latin as freshmen. I think there are just decisions and choices that have to be made. And also, I would say what we support wholeheartedly is any student who really wants to have a 4-year sequence in Latin. That is absolutely available to them, and we would encourage them to take Latin as 9th graders if that's really their goal and their interest. So Dave will talk to you a little bit more about some of the details and specifics.
Thanks, Rena, and thank you to the board and Dr. Harrison. And again, I'd like to start off by saying also, I was really surprised when I started to learn about the rumors and misunderstandings last night. Because as principal, it's very easy for me to say that our Latin program is one that I value tremendously. And I know that in my short 2 years, it was something that I quickly learned about here in Irvington. And often when I've sat and had a chance either in a format like this or with parents and in other formats to talk about vision that I have for how we build curriculum at the high school, I often refer exactly to our Latin program as one of our models of success and one of the things that we would want to use to talk about what it means to have a sequence of courses that build upon each other, allow students to develop their skills, and certainly allow them to build their college readiness and their preparation for their post-secondary experiences. So that's why it was a little troubling to me to see these rumors and these misunderstandings play out. That being said, I know that we've had many conversations both in here and in multiple formats about the desire to expand our curriculum and also, quite frankly, being thoughtful around the impact that that has. So last year, when we sat and had a lot of dialogue here with the board about a writing curriculum, we also anticipated that it may create some challenges for some of our 9th graders. So one of the things that we did this year was to anticipate that. And for the first time, we had a 10th period Latin 1 class. And that was one way to make sure that we were anticipating and offsetting. We had a Latin 1 class that was offered during our 10th period.
Is the 10th period the same time that the music classes are held?
So what we recognized was that students who take music already have extra periods during their day. It was really students that potentially might need a different elective, and it created flexibility. So what we actually saw was our enrollment numbers this year in our Latin 1 program are very similar to what we've seen in the last 5 years. And while we're not done yet enrolling our current 8th graders to move forward, we once again are seeing very similar patterns of where we're at.
Can you give us the numbers on those for the last 5 years?
So,
Sure.
sure, absolutely.
Like 5-year time?
We have 3 years. It's.
Well, then how can you say 5?
I didn't think. Did you say 5?
So, I mean, we've been seeing, our data goes back because we actually have 9th graders. We have our students that, as 12th graders, where they were when they were 9th graders. So it's a span of years that covers multiple years within that.
In other words, maybe I can clarify. So what we looked at for our data is we looked at our current seniors, how many seniors we currently have enrolled in Latin 4 or AP, 4H or AP, and how many students were enrolled in 9th grade. Because what we're trying to make sure is that we're not precluding kids from having a 4-year sequence. That's really the goal. So whether a student takes Latin in 9th grade or 10th grade, either way is an option. But what we don't want to do is have a student who's looking for a 4-year sequence not be able to complete the sequence. Where students pick Latin up is variable, and it should be. You want that because of different options.
Comparing the numbers of students currently taking 4th year, which is an AP course, I guess, right?
Or 4H.
4H as seniors with the number of freshmen currently taking
Right.
it, and saying there are not fewer freshmen than the current seniors, but there would normally be a lot of attrition over 4 years.
There should
So
be.
That doesn't say that there's less enrollment. The question is, has the
No.
enrollment in freshmen gone down?
No, so I'll just give you,
What are the numbers there? Wait, you have to wait.
right. So for this year, I want to say the enrollment was, we had 50 students enrolled. So I'm going to give you the 9th grade enrollment for 2009-10, we had 64 students. In 10-11, we had 68 students. And in 11-12, we had 50 students. This year, we have 50 students. What we've looked at in the data is we don't see that the freshman writing course has changed the enrollment.
What about 12, 13, and 13, 14?
Wait, sorry, I didn't get the years straight there.
I only have that for the numbers for
This
seniors.
year, they arguably already had the second period of English, so this year's numbers would.
50.
Right, so this year's numbers are not as valuable as what the year before was and the year before that.
But I think what we want to, what I want us to consider, though, is the number that's important is not the number of freshmen. The number that's important, and I'm looking at Michelle and John, the
It's not clear that's true.
the number that's important is students can pick up Latin, or another language for that matter, or other electives or other sequences, anywhere along their 4 years. That's not an uncommon approach. So this idea that students have to pick it up in 9th grade is not necessarily the only way that students can achieve the sequence. So we made decisions, and I think that's what Dave is talking about. We did make decisions. We felt that our students needed to strengthen their writing across all levels of students. It's not a remedial course, our freshman writing course. And we made the decision to expand that. We also had some issues with health in previous years. So we also made the decision that if health should be an elective, that's really pushed in 9th grade, also because you want to have other electives available to your children when they're juniors and seniors, and there's a lot of other options. So,
Can you explain what the nature of this push to have it in 9th grade is? What does that mean? What's the nature of the push?
In terms of the health class? So I think it's important first also to understand health is a mandatory requirement from the state. It's a half credit or a half-year class. So the way that we're scheduling it this year is it fits very nicely to offset the writing course. So it's not taking up another period in a 9th grader's schedule. It fits very nicely in that. So the question isn't, is that taking away an opportunity?
Nicely, is it a half year?
So our writing course is a half-year class, so it runs every other day on an A or a BD schedule.
Is it required that freshmen then take it in 9th grade henceforth?
So it's not required to be taken as a freshman, but here's what we recognize and understand, that as many of our students progress through their high school career, there are more and more rich elective courses that we offer at the high school. So if they don't take it in their freshman year, they're potentially then clogging up one of the periods that they can use for a potential AP course or their extension of, let's say, Latin later on down the line, and they won't be able to fit it in their schedule. So it's a course that has to be taken within some place in their 4-year sequence, and it actually works very well for us to take those mandatory requirements, be able to honor them and have them cleared through a 9th grade experience. That way it gives students more flexibility when they get to the years of their high school career where we actually offer up more of our electives, and the options and choices that they have start to open up.
So, I mean, what I have heard is that the shift was to require it in 9th grade, and you're telling us that that's not true, but it's...
So
What does it mean?
the
What do you
desire
mean?
is to actually require it as a 9th grader, because again, with our writing class, I'm sorry, not creative writing, but
Does desire mean you are requiring it or not?
well, so if I can explain myself, John, when we have a writing course that's a half-year course, we don't offer, let's say, the discussion on the table is Latin. Students can't take Latin as a half-year course. So there is now this half-year option that's available to them. So it actually when I say it fits very nicely, it's a requirement they need for graduation, and they also now have an opportunity to fit it into a place in their schedule that's available to them. So yes, we are looking to have every 9th grader be able to complete their health sequence
So it's
before they
required.
move on.
You've now moved to require it.
So,
in
I
9th
think
grade.
it's also important to understand that
That is
currently
what you're
this
saying.
year,
Are you saying that or you're not saying?
we have roughly 90% of our current 9th graders taking health. So it fits into what our current structure shows.
But it may affect the other 10% in some way.
right.
And I think we'd be open. I haven't heard, I didn't have a single family come to me this year and tell me that they were looking to enroll their child in a Latin class and couldn't fit it in.
Well, maybe,
No, excuse me.
Wait, let's just wait. So are we done with our explanation? Because then we can have people actually come from the audience and comment. Because I do have more.
Can we comment on that, or you want us to?
No, I just want to keep some order here because we're about to lose order. So are we asking more questions of Dave?
I have a question.
Are we asking more? Yes, we are.
What is the process for something becoming a requirement?
In terms of the decision that the school makes, or in terms of the state
Yeah,
making it a
yeah.
requirement?
I mean, in terms of communication to the public, in terms of communication to the board, in terms of approvals. I mean, clearly, we had a similar situation with graduation, which I brought to the attention that there's laws that govern, that boards need to approve changes to graduation requirements. And in fact, really, I think those laws are there so that the public has a chance to hear what's going on.
If I may interject.
No, this is a board discussion. You don't have.
Well, no, it's actually his,
Robert.
but wait, hold on.
Can I finish?
Yes, you can, but just,
Yes,
John,
yes.
John.
No, Philip.
But it's-
Robin has the floor.
No, she doesn't. She never asked for the floor. It is actually the superintendent and the principals,
I respectfully disagree, but fine.
but that is the way it is. And it is Robin's moment now to ask her question. So what is the question that you're asking?
The question is,
What's the approval process?
right, when you implement a requirement in the high school for high school graduation or for high school requirements by year, what is the process that goes through in terms of approvals?
Okay, that's a question.
And if I may, Dave, I think we're talking about two different things. When we had conversation earlier in the year with respect to changing courses that were being offered and courses that we were considering for graduation requirements, that was changing the course selection that kids had to have. So in this case, there wasn't any determination that there was a change in courses that children need to take. Children need to take the same courses. In this case, the effort was to try to accommodate students by having students take the course earlier in their career, looking at it through a number of different lenses. I think, as Dave said, it opens the door to opportunity for other courses, and courses that some may say would provide opportunities for them at college that they wouldn't have otherwise. But it also puts us in a position whereby we're not having students coming up against graduation requirements and not being able to fit in all the courses that they would like.
Wait, hold on. I would like to ask a question.
But he
No,
didn't,
no,
nobody
because-
answered my question.
Can I respond to that? It's oxymoronic to say that we're accommodating students by requiring them to do something.
Can I just, I would like to understand, how does the requirement to take health in ninth grade impact Latin? Because that's not clear to me at all.
I'm not sure that it's clear to me that it impacts Latin at all. As I said before, I didn't have a single student or family come forward to me suggesting that they couldn't take Latin this year. So as far as I'm concerned, the school has been thoughtful about making sure that Latin is available for every rising ninth grader that wants to have it in their schedule.
So just to, to clarify the question, so requiring health in ninth grade does not impact Latin?
Correct. I don't see it as something that prevents a student from taking Latin.
Right, so that is your,
Can I state my understanding of that issue?
yes, you may.
My understanding is that it doesn't automatically affect it, I'd rather not use impact, but it does mean that students have a greater, more restricted choice in their schedule to fit electives. They may, for example, have to face a hard choice between studio art and Latin, or something else in Latin. And those who have music in the 10th period can't use that as an option. So it reduces the opportunities they have, makes it less likely, makes it harder for people to take Latin, and it makes it harder for them to get that entry into ninth grade. That's my understanding of, and that was part of my stated concern with the writing course last year.
You did
Which
say.
I did vote against for that reason and others.
I still don't have an answer as to what is the process for a requirement to be put into place. Chris, I understand they're different. I just feel like communication-wise, they both kind of appeared from my perspective. So I'd just like to know what the process is for now that health is a requirement, what was the process?
Well, again, I just want to clarify, health is a requirement because the state makes it a requirement. So our process of deciding that we feel that it's in the best interest to offer it during ninth grade is a process that we've gone through internally to figure out how students can best proceed through their course sequences.
So there's no communication in terms of the way it was decided. I don't mean to point fingers, I'm just trying to understand. It doesn't seem like it was communicated at all when it was being decided, nor was the board advised of that this was something up for consideration.
It's not really up for consideration. I guess that's the point. I don't think it's, so let me try and clarify. When you look at when you look at a student over 4 years, well, our job is to look, and that's why we certainly have Dave with all his high school experiences, how do we ensure the most opportunities for students? We know there are a limited number of periods in the day. We know that there are limitations to what can be scheduled. We had a situation where students were not being guided to take health in 9th grade, and what we had was students were getting to be seniors, and they had not met their New York State required health course. So when the freshman writing course, which runs AB, so if you run an AB course, you have to have something else run opposite an AB course to balance it. So in looking at it and looking at the New York State requirement for health, it did make sense to us that we should be guiding our students in 9th grade. The other thing that was happening is we had mixed grades for health, and we also found that it would be better to have our students more closely aligned developmentally in age and need and life to be taking a class with other 9th or 10th graders at most, rather than kids across the grade levels. So in looking at this, our goal was, and I think that Dave has said this, our goal was to make sure over time our students had the most opportunity. And yes, I mean, I think to a certain degree, that is what an administration is for. It is our job to run the schools. It's our job to build schedules that are doable and can have students enter them. And that's what Dave and Deb have done. And I also think, again, I'm not sure how these two are syncing up, but what I will say is that we are not suggesting for 1 second that any student who is interested in a 4-year sequence of Latin, it is available to them. So we actually feel that we are not precluding students from getting the sequence, tapping into their interests, and being able to access the courses that they want. But we are a public school, and we have a certain number of periods in a day, and we have certain state mandates. So yeah, we're working within those limitations, but it is our job to guide our students to what we think will give them the most options.
I mean, one of the things that strikes me is that you keep saying it's our goal that kids can take 4-year sequence of Latin.
If they choose.
Right, but that could be a goal, but frankly, it seems like someone else's goal might be to take Latin early because it helps in grammar and it helps in some of the other classes. I mean, that might be one goal, but I don't think that is clearly the goal for everybody. I mean, some people would prefer to take it younger and then see how it goes. I mean, there's a lot of other, to me,
But
that's
they can.
one goal. I mean, you keep saying
But they
the
can't.
goal.
No, so I'm sorry. I don't mean to say it
To
that
me,
way.
it isn't. I think to a lot of students, their goal would be to take Latin in 9th grade. Not necessarily to
can.
have a 4-year sequence, but they want to get that Latin in 9th grade, and for a variety of reasons. So I don't kind of.
Okay, so I
don't feel
misspoke.
like
I
that
wasn't
is
making,
the
I'm
goal.
sorry. I'm
I don't
sorry.
really feel like that is the goal.
Okay.
Personally. But, and then the other thing is, you know, and just in speaking to people, it seems like a lot of students felt that it was optimal in the past to take health in senior year. I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm just saying for a lot of students, they felt like the way to optimize all the opportunities in the high school was to leave that half-year elective for senior year. So to me, it seems like there's a lot of ways to approach this, but there could be something that automatically kicks up if you're a senior and you haven't taken it, that you have to take it, you know, fall of senior year. But for a lot of students, they feel like it precludes opportunities by forcing it on them in 9th grade. And I mean, I don't understand if you're saying we get into situations where they don't have it by senior year, but then it's automatic they have to take it senior year. I don't understand where the problem lies there.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be individual by student, and we look at situations of where we can fit it into a schedule because of when the health courses are being offered. So you run into situations where then a child is going to potentially have to make a choice between another high-level elective and potentially the requirement to take a health course. I also want to clarify that I think that when we're looking at, speaking of a 4-year sequence versus a child that wants 1 or 2 years of Latin, that same opportunity is there. I don't think we don't know when a child is a freshman whether or not it's going to be a 1-year course of study or 4 years worth of study. We're not saying that every system is perfect. We're looking at opportunities to be able to expand learning experiences for our children and give them as many opportunities as possible. As we're saying, we looked at our experiences this year, and we can't speak to concerns from our freshmen that have been presented in this way, and we can't represent that our current freshmen are going to have proper opportunities removed from them or limited opportunities to access electives in their senior year, because clearly they're not there at that point. So we could presume a lot of different things, but this year it seemed to work relatively well, is my understanding.
Okay.
There you go. So I'd like to move on and get some questions from the community. Or comments really, and we can come back and have follow-up comments.
Okay.
I would just say that from my perspective, this seems like the challenge here is that was there proper due diligence done with the impact or the effect of requiring health in 9th grade? Because clearly there are people here who are very concerned about limited flexibility, and that's what's really at the heart of the concern, that their ability to take the courses they want to take is going to be impacted. And I guess it's got to be extremely difficult to go through all the different cases to see what would happen if you posit this idea of health in 9th grade for good intentions. But now I think we're seeing the fallout of the due diligence happening in real time, I guess. So having said that, it'd be great to hear from people who are actually experienced this.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and then just maybe I have to, and with due respect, the idea of due diligence, I believe that if our diligence was not a focus and we did not pursue this in earnest, we would have had this conversation a year ago. It's growing out of other concerns that, for whatever reason, have drawn attention to this. And I don't want to anyone think that we're ignoring the concerns or the dialogue today. It's all something that we walk away and we're going to reflect on and think about what our practice is. But I think our diligence was done. We did have conversation last year, I believe, about the pairing of health, because we were talking about it being a half-year course and that wanting it to be meaningful, because the other option could have been that it would have been a study hall. And we were looking at the opportunity for it to be a meaningful credit-bearing opportunity for our students. So I think I don't want to paint it with a broad brush, and I say that with respect to everybody.
I guess I would say that I think the board needs to be kept more in the loop than the current board chooses to be kept in the loop on these issues.
And I think all we need is to have clarity on that expectation, and we can have that level of dialogue.
Isn't demanding that you keep it in the loop as much as it should.
And not only the board, but I frankly think something like this really affects our students, and I think that students deserve the right to have a say. I mean, ultimately, the final decision is clearly not with the people who come forth, but I think it's so helpful, at least to me, to hear the opinions of people that have been through it, and good and bad. And I think that it seems like there's been a series of things this year that the communication piece has been less than perfect. So I really think hopefully moving forward.
I would prefer not to have conversations that are evaluative in nature in public. I believe that we have acknowledged a couple situations where we've acknowledged that we could have had more dialogue on subjects, and I prefer that we leave it to the facts of the matter and not paint that again with a broad brush.
Let's move on to hear more from people sitting in the audience. Ms. Sella.
I'm here to apologize to the board, to Dr. Harrison and Dr. Kaur, for what it was. My concerns for enrollment in Latin were never meant to come to this. I equated it to the peasants bringing torches up to the castle to burn out the Frankenstein's monster. That was not the intent. At the end of last week, when I spoke to the art teacher, she said she was concerned that we were all going to be fighting over the same students in 9th grade, and I had spoken several times to Mr. Cohn. We're on the same page. We are both firmly committed to the Latin program. John and I have worked very hard to make it, I think, in scope and in quality, the best program in a public school in the state. When I unfortunately expressed my concerns to some of my older students that it was going to be difficult to enroll students, and this year the enrollment is down considerably in first year from last year. I had 68 I began at the beginning of the year. I have 50 now. That ultimately will work its way through the system. When I expressed my concern, I did not want the students to post chats on Facebook. Apparently it went viral. I don't do Facebook. I don't know what that means, but I think this qualifies as viral. And when I heard that there was an expression that Latin was going to be dropped, first-year Latin was going to be dropped, no one could sign up for Latin, there were only 5 students registered for Latin, I went borderline. I became upset last night. I called a student. I said, where is this coming from? So I apologize. I had no intention of this. I actually was hoping that a couple of students would join me at the board meeting tonight to actually talk about the benefits of Latin. It never occurred to me that they were going to take it the other way and think that we were trying to. I realized Mr. Cohen in no way, nor has the board ever expressed an interest in trying to curtail the program. My concerns always are, though, that if I can't get students into the program in 9th grade, starting them in 10th or 11th isn't going to make a sequence. I must have them in 9th grade. I know students have to make a choice. I realize that in a school our size, they can't take everything. I just feel so passionately the best thing that any student can take is Latin. I know. But I firmly believe that if there's any way that we can enroll them, then we can help them. It is heartwarming. It brings tears to my eyes. I know it's been a nightmare for you people, but the support of the community and the support of the students, even if misguided and based on misinformation, it has been, it's been reaffirming that what we're doing is right. And if the students feel this strongly about it, it's important to them. And even if they were misguided in the way they presented their argument, I am proud of them. But I do apologize to you. No one should have taken the browbeating that you have taken. I've seen now some of the chats and the vitriol and the blaming. That was never meant, and that wasn't. It wasn't supposed to be a part of this dialogue. So I apologize, and I do know that the administration supports us. And Mr. Cohen and I have had several talks on how we can firm up the enrollment in Latin and how we can make it a full program and not exclude anyone. So I do apologize, and I'm sorry you had to take this from all facets of the community. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate having people here expressing their opinion. I mean, this is, it's an unusual event for us in our board meeting because we've had very quiet board meetings this year, so we are happy to have people who are very passionate about a subject come and express that passion. As a 5-year Latin student myself under your predecessor, Mr. Mataloni, I can say that passion is obviously right here on the board. I think John also took Latin as well, so we are...
Just my kids.
Oh, sorry. There is clearly a lot of enthusiasm and support right here in this room for what you're doing, and we're happy that
just a comment. We were doing AP Latin review just before coming here, and I mentioned to Mr. Cohen that it couldn't have been more apropos, but we just reviewed the section where Caesar in Book 6 of the Gallic Wars comments on the German custom of censorship, and it said that it's made sacred by law that if anyone receives a rumor or a report from his neighbor, he is to bring it to the powers that be, to the school board, and not discuss it with the uneducated masses, because people who are rash and uneducated often react poorly to rumors and take matters into their own hands about the highest situations. So the students in the room couldn't stop laughing.
Did they have the internet back then?
Pardon me?
I would also say that the other good thing, obviously, is that this, where it started, with your comments, has also led to an awareness on our part. I can only speak for myself, on my part especially, in terms of the potential challenges of taking Latin in 9th grade with the new structure. Because sometimes that's when something good can come out of something that, well, as you said. Right. So why don't we hear from other people in the audience, and I think Clara is about to step up to the microphone.
I don't like being short. Okay. I guess that works. Yeah, that works. Okay.
Make sure you have to state your name.
My name is Clara Montgomery. Hello. I live in Irvington. Okay. What? Is there anything else I need to say?
No, that's it.
Okay, good. First thing I want to say is that last thing was a very good example of how Latin can connect to other areas in life and how important it is in that sense. Okay, so I have a few things. First of all, you say you value and fully support the Latin program, and you say that this won't preclude anyone from taking it. However, between all the other required classes, continuing a modern language from middle school, and if put together you have another period required to be full of the health and the writing class, you have one free period, meaning you have time to take one elective, or two half-credit electives, but really one elective, which would mean you would have to choose, for instance, between art and Latin. And I can use myself as an example. As a freshman, I took art, I took Latin, and I don't know what my year would have been like without either of those. Like, they're two really important classes. And music, too. Like, so what, if you have all your time full, you can take a 10th period. Now, I'm not saying that the 10th period class is a bad thing. That's an incredible thing. I'm so glad you're doing that. More people need to take Latin, and if that's what it takes to have them possible to do it, then I'm really glad. But what about the people who take art and music? Then they can't take Latin, or they have to take Latin at the expense of music, and that's not fair. And Latin has taught me so much more about English, honestly, than any other class. For instance, in first year Latin last year, we did a research paper about like a topic relating to Rome, and I learned more about the research process in that than I think I've learned as a whole in the rest of my life. And in terms just in teaching you how language works and like how writing works, and it's so beneficial, it's amazing. Which means that taking it as a freshman, even if you're not intending to take a whole 4-year course of it, is really beneficial just because it gives you those skills that have you for the rest of that follow you for the rest of high school and for the rest of life. Also, you say that taking it as a freshman, you don't really need to do that unless you're intending to do the 4-year sequence. I just said why that's, like, it's still helpful as a freshman even if you're not intending to do 4 years. But as a 9th grader, how do you know what you're going to want to do in the next 4 years? People's minds changed. People take Latin saying, oh, I'm just going to try it, I don't expect I'm going to finish, and then end up taking it for 4 years. And yeah. Also, you're talking, I mean, just in terms of the value of the writing class, I think it would be, I'm just remembering last year when there was the issue with the freedom of speech thing, you held a special meeting for comments from students to hear people's experience and like their opinions on things. I was thinking, because there's so many people with so much to say about this, and I'm sure there's, for instance, freshmen who can say what they have or haven't gained from that writing class. I'm wondering if it would be possible to have another one of those special meetings to hear comments from students, because I think that might be really, really useful. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion. Thank you, Clara. Other students or parents?
Hi, my name's Gabe Siegel. I'm in Clara's grade. Just to reiterate what she said, again, iter being a Latin word, which I wouldn't have learned otherwise if I hadn't taken Latin last year. I just would like to share my personal experience. I was in 9th grade last year, and I was able to take 3 electives, Latin, a drawing and painting class, and music theory, all of which I think shaped my year, shaped who I am, and helped me in the future. I went to all-county orchestra because of things that I learned in my music theory class. I'm able to do an advanced painting class this year and go on to an AP art class next year because I was able to take that drawing and painting class last year. And I've learned so much about rhetoric, culture, language, English, French. There's an incredible amount of things that I've learned from Latin that I wouldn't have been able to learn otherwise from any of my other classes. And I understand everything that's been said about how there's still a chance to take Latin or any other class, but I mean, there's just no space to do what I was able to do and what other people in my grade have been able to do and what other kids who are older than me have been able to do with their high school careers because they had multiple space for electives. So I'm taking health this year because I had space in my schedule, and I honestly think that if I had to take it freshman year, my whole high school career would have been different. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just add one thing to what I said before? Being that you mentioned that you had not heard from anyone who was concerned about the fact that they didn't have time to take Latin. That does not mean anything because I know many, many, many people who have had concerns, who have been frustrated at the way certain requirements worked out, whatever, but didn't speak up because they didn't think there was any point. And so saying that you didn't hear anything, so there must not be a problem, means nothing. I'm sorry, but it means nothing. Yeah, okay. Also, I think it needs to be made more clear. I'm sorry. I think it needs to be made more clear to the student population, because I think a lot of people aren't aware of the regular school board meetings and that they're allowed to be there, that they're allowed to talk about their concerns. And I don't know if this is a large thing, but I've talked to a couple seniors, I'm 16, but who didn't know that when they're 18 they could vote. So there needs to be more awareness in the student body of how people can participate.
Thank you. Another good suggestion.
More civics instruction on voting.
My name is Andrea Carmesino. I want to start out by saying that I'm really concerned that we've put our teachers in a position of having to apologize. I don't understand why Ms. Sella had to get up and apologize for being a dedicated, devoted teacher who has taught all of my kids and all the other kids in Irvington who have not only signed up for Latin, but along with Latin, gotten exactly what Gabe said, an incredible English education, learned what a direct object was and what an indirect object was, learned about culture, was surrounded by her incredible content knowledge and her ability to inspire kids, not only in Latin, but in all the other classes that they take. And I'm really concerned that this situation where, of course, she was concerned about the Latin program. The rest of us, I had no idea that this was something in the works. When kids got a hold of it, isn't that what we want? Don't we want children, who are almost adults, to be involved in the process, number one, of their own education, but also in a democratic process? There's no reason she should apologize for inspiring her students to protect what they value, number one. Number two, I would really like to see something done about the writing class that is required for 9th graders. I know I speak for my son, who is in 9th grade this year. He has called it an absolute, a redundant and not useful piece of his time. So until we have an evaluation in some kind of qualifying, quantifying way where we can show what is happening in that AB class, why are all kids required to sit through that class when perhaps it's only a few kids, or could there be some kind of testing mechanism so the kids who need extra writing can get the extra writing, and that would free up a lot of the student body, a lot of those ninth graders, to do with their time what Clara and Gabe are saying, explore the things that they find important and to follow their own passions and their own skills. I think those are my two most important points.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Camille Agro. And as you may know, I'm a big supporter of Latin. Both of my boys, one is taking Latin now. My son, who's in college, took Latin for 3 years, and then he took 2 semesters in college, actually. And he took not freshman Latin, whatever the next thing was, because he was so well prepared. And he's a science kid, but this was one sort of out-of-the-box course that he could take and enjoy and do something that he felt comfortable with coming from Irvington. So my sons have echoed what we've heard here. They've learned more English in Latin than in English. They've learned more writing in Latin. Their grammar they learned all through Latin. And it makes me think, why not require Latin 1 and forget the writing course? I mean, or encourage Latin 1 or let it substitute for the writing course. That could solve all problems. And in terms of, I know we were talking about if you want Latin, you make the choice, it's your 4-year sequence, but as these guys have shown, and my children have also shown, it doesn't have to be your 4-year sequence. Both of my sons took Project Lead the Way, which is a science engineering course for freshman year, and they took Latin. They both took health, or James is taking health now in 10th grade. Like, so what? They took it in 10th grade. Their schedule didn't explode. It didn't cause a problem. I think it's really misguided if we're talking about giving the kids more flexibility to then insist that they take health in 9th grade. That just seems like we want you to have more flexibility, but we're going to restrict you. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, like these students chose art. Like my children chose the science, the Project Lead the Way, and it worked with health. I mean, it worked with Latin, and then they took health later. Health can go against a lab. My kids are science kids. My older son took up through AP Physics. Health matches up with a lab. They can, that every other day thing. And as I was saying, my older son didn't take the 4-year sequence because when later on, there were more conflicts with BC Calc and with AP, whatever. There's more conflicts later. So to be able to take Latin early on, fitting health in somewhere actually opened up more opportunity for him at the end of his high school years. So I think it's misguided to say you're opening opportunity for later, because that wasn't how Lewis experienced it. It's not how James is going to experience it. And that's not, and as these folks have pointed out. So I just think if you could rethink that, I mean, it ties it up in a nice bow for the guidance, like, okay, everybody got health out of the way. But for the kids, it's not necessarily for everybody to do it that way. And I think that we can be reasonable. Everyone's going to graduate. Everyone's going to take health. And just give them the choice to take Latin and an art or a science or a something else. I think that it can all work. It's such a great program that anything that diminishes the numbers, I think, just chips away at the quality of Irvington. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm Ellen Weissman, parent of Clara. I don't want to repeat what everybody else has also said, because I think that it's pretty clear that many students want to have the flexibility, and that at least, to Camille, to me, it doesn't make sense to restrict choice in order to increase flexibility, not making it a requirement to take health freshman year, and to take that writing class freshman year would actually still allow people to do what they're doing now, or to do the way you have set up these requirements. But I think what I would like to mention is what to me seems like the unintended consequences of the changes to the 9th grade requirements. I think the real goal sounds to me like people wanted to improve writing and improve the English experience. I haven't seen any evidence that increasing the amount of time kids spend in class actually improves the writing that they do or the level of their knowledge. I know in middle school, the English was increased. Are our kids going into high school any better prepared than they were before English was doubled up in middle school? That doesn't seem to be the experience, or we wouldn't be adding more in high school as well. So I really think that has to be looked at. Maybe what goes on in the classroom is more important than the number of hours that they spend in it. And what goes on in the Latin classroom, in the Greek classroom, is the most excellent teaching in the school. The kids benefit enormously from the quality of the instruction, from the enthusiasm, from the passion. And I think we've already heard everybody talk about how Latin improves grammar, improves writing, improves thinking, improves clarity. So I think if we're looking at trying to achieve a goal, achieving the goal would actually be making it more accessible to take the class, not making kids sit through, I'm sorry, I'm going to offend people, substandard English classes more hours during the week. The other thing that I also think this is an opportunity for is an opportunity to model adults being willing to look at the decisions that they make, being willing to revisit perhaps things that were well-intentioned but didn't work out properly, willing to take responsibility, to be open to criticism, and to change what they're doing if in fact what they're doing is misguided. I'm greatly disturbed by the sort of reticence and reluctance to call a new requirement a requirement. I don't think that models open, honest, transparent communication. I find it terribly disturbing. I find it terribly disturbing that Ms. Sella had to apologize for her kids' involvement and passion. And the reality is that while this wasn't intended to choke Latin, by creating the scheduling requirements that you have, even if it wasn't intended to, the consequence is to choke it. If you reduce enrollment, then you reduce sections. The more you reduce sections, the fewer options there are for kids to actually take it, and becomes sort of, the death spiral. So I'm also just concerned about the process and wanted to voice that.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maya Carmesino. I'm a senior at the high school. I would first like to point out that in terms of what Ms. Sella said, there was no form of communication to the students from Ms. Sella or Mr. Silverman that said that there was any intention of ending the Latin program. I know from being in the discussion that some students sort of obscured what was said, and so then it led to some kids accusing adults of trying to end the Latin program, but many have now made a strong effort to clear that, and it's been being communicated that that was never the intention. But in terms of the required health, I took health junior year. Freshman year I took Latin and studio art. I know from many of my friends that took health in later years that it was never a problem, and in terms of scheduling, actually, many guidance counselors, especially mine, really encouraged us to take health freshman year. So it's already being encouraged, but for some students it just doesn't happen to work out. So I think that, forcing students to do that wouldn't really be helpful. Again, Latin is so important. The classics are very important to a lot of students, and I think really what a lot of students are passionate about is making sure that it is accessible, and with the writing class, and if there were required health, it really wouldn't be accessible at all, and I think it's really important to take another look at that. And again, so many kids that I've talked to have said, we took health junior year, we took health senior year, we took health sophomore year. It's never been a problem. Kids always fit it into their schedule, and it's the same. They go, they learn. I don't think it really matters what year it's taken, but I think it definitely matters what year Latin is taken, because, you want to get all 4 years in, and if you don't take it freshman year, then that's not possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So my name is Catherine Palmieri, and I came home last night after a meeting to be confronted by Dylan at the front door telling me how things were going downhill fast with Latin. He was texting his friends, and clearly they were up in arms over what was going on with Latin. And I confess that my first reaction was the uneducated German peasant, and I went right for the rumor. But then I remembered my last name ends in an I, and therefore I had to go to the Italian roots, and then immediately I decided to address the rumor with Raina and David. And knowing Raina and David as I do, and their willingness to listen and their willingness to be part of a dialogue, I felt that, you know, that would be the right way to address it. So I did send them a note, and I said, 1, you may want to consider it, and 2, heads up. This sounds like a tsunami that's on its way. And I think the second thing that, as I communicated back and forth with Raina and David today, was I was reassured by the notes that they sent back saying that, you know, they were fully supportive of Latin and they wanted it to continue, and were enthusiastic about the kids who were supporting it. But as the day wore on and I thought more and more about it, I said to myself, and I also sent this to Raina and Dave, I said, my God, we have a public school here where the kids are getting excited about Latin. I mean, how phenomenal is that? And I said, you know, take that, Scarsdale, take that, Ardsley, you know, Rye, you know, you think you've got elite students. Look at what we've got. We've got kids getting up in arms over Latin. And I just thought that was phenomenal, and I wanted to say that. And let's not forget who's inspired it all, because how lucky are we in this district to have a teacher that kids will rally to the cause and actually fight over. I think it's just phenomenal. And the last thing I want to say to Marcella is, if you want to come run my campaign, I'd love to have you. That's all.
Thank you. Clara, you want to go back quickly, though, because 3 times the charm.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I just want to say, I was here at the beginning of the meeting, and I heard you talking about the Chromebooks. I just want to say, there's a hand dryer in the bottom floor of the science wing that has been broken for over 3 years. And if you have money to buy more Chromebooks, you probably have money to fix that hand dryer. Just saying.
Yeah. We do have a maintenance budget, Clara, that hopefully will take care of that. But thank you for bringing to our attention.
Sorry, I would like to say one more thing. I think also another thing that's really important is communication. Like my mom said, throughout this year I've felt that there's really been a lack of communication to the student body on many controversial topics. And I think many times people may feel that the student body is trying to attack, but in reality we just really want to be informed and involved on decision making. So especially with this, when all of this happened, you know, we didn't receive any form of communication clarifying what was going on. You know, if there's a rumor going around that the administration or whoever is trying to end the Latin program, if we could receive clarification, it would just put it to an end. But instead of receiving clarification, we're just left with really no accurate information. So I think that's just really important, to have a more open dialogue and especially communication with the student body, because, I mean, just for me this whole year, I've really felt on multiple occasions, not just with this situation, that the communication has really been lacking, and it leaves students feeling really confused. And when students are misinformed, that's when things sort of, you know, rioting happens and things get out of control. But really, in reality, if there was communication from the very beginning, then that would cease to exist. So I think, you know, having the students be informed and having the students be involved in these kinds of dialogues, like a health class, you know, if we're deciding to have a health class mandatory for freshmen, hold the meeting and have kids come in and say, this was my experience with health, and I think that that would be great, or I think that that wouldn't be great, because obviously adults are good at making decisions, but at the same time, it's really important to have the youth represented, because, you know, we're the ones that are experiencing it and we're the ones that are being affected by it. And if we're not involved in that decision-making process, then, you know, it causes real issues.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
just want to respond to something that was just said. I think everybody wants to sort of have some kind of healing and feel good. But the fact is that even if the intention has not been to eliminate Latin or strangle Latin, or if, you know, Catherine had emails with Raina and Dave, and no, we're not trying to stop Latin. The reality is if the decisions you make it very difficult for kids to enroll, then even if that wasn't the intention, that may be the consequence. And so I don't think even if everybody supports, you know, Ms. Sella and Mr. Silverman and Latin in theory, if the things you do in reality have a different impact, then you need to be responsible for that, be flexible, and be willing to revisit the decisions you've made.
Thank you. All right, so we move back to board comments.
Yeah, I want a comment on something that,
Right.
I didn't catch her name, but when she
Maya?
talked about, no, the mom. Amy. When you said, don't we want kids to come forth in the democratic process, I so second that, and you even said we do like when people come to the board meetings, and we encourage people to come to the board meetings. And some of the communication I also got from a few different sources was a little concerning about, I commend you guys for coming, because it's not the easiest thing, and you did a great job standing up there and making your points known. But I have been told by multiple sources that there was an overt effort to discourage students from coming, and in fact they were asked to please not come to the board meeting. And I've got to say, I have such a problem with that. I mean, communication is everything, and as Phil said, as board members, I, for one, want to encourage people to come, especially students, to take part and be active, and that's part of the learning process, and that's part of what we should be doing for them. So I am very, very concerned about the situation, and I just have to say that I think certainly there will be more conversations about this in a more appropriate setting.
Yeah,
So.
I would share that concern. I think any suggestion that people should not be free to come to a public forum and express their views, you know, is just runs up against some fundamental beliefs and liberties that we should be teaching our children. You know, so it's just wildly inappropriate, I think.
Mm-hmm. So I think in terms of next steps, I think what we need to do is come up with a plan for, and really considering possibility of change or what.
I would say.
I thought you were done
Well,
saying.
I also have one more comment.
Well, I have some suggestions. Maybe we can talk about what we do want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
That's.
Two things that I think come out of this.
Yeah.
One is that I think we should revisit the decision to require health of ninth graders and reopen that, let people re-choose their courses.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that was brought to the board. I certainly don't approve of it. I haven't read any sound rationale for doing it. So I think it should be overturned. Unless somebody can come up with a good reason. We've only heard really the contradiction in that we're giving people more options by restricting them, and that, as several speakers have mentioned, doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think first of all, I think that should have come to the board, in my view. It didn't, and I think at this point the board should deny that and direct the administration to change that.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one thing. And the second thing is, I think we should have in place a proper reporting process for the ninth grade writing, and to understand what benefits it's had, and to really require that be reported on before the end of June, so we can evaluate whether that program
Mm-hmm.
has been worth the trade-offs that it's required.
Okay.
Those are the two things I would like to see happen.
All right. Robin?
Yeah, I mean, kind of from a bigger picture, I agree with John on all of them, but on revisiting health, I also think it brings up a bigger kind of top-down issue, which is restrictive versus open scheduling, you know, giving the kids more choice versus less choice. It really is a board decision as to what type of school district we are and we want to be moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
I think it kind of is, you know, the microcosm is the health class, but the bigger picture is who is Irvington and what do we want to be and what kind of education do we want our kids to get and opportunities. And I think from the board perspective that it's really important that we have that conversation and that we kind of maybe set some clear guidelines, because it's concerning. I also think that there needs to be more processes in place in terms of to ensure that communication happens on various levels at various schools. I mean, there's a variety of things that happened this year that there is no communication to the parents. As a parent of a sixth grader, I can tell you that I feel that way. And I think maybe things have to be a little more formalized then to ensure that students are part of the process moving forward. And sometimes it's not at all to be part of the decision-making process. It's more just to educate them as to what's going on day to day in the classroom so that they can be better able to work with their kids at night or help them on their homework. It's just this, I think it needs to happen. And then, I completely agree with John. I mean, I think it might have been in curriculum committee. We talked about last year when we agreed to do the 9th grade double block of ELA. We also requested that there would be a process in which we would, at some point mid-year, review how it was doing. And I know the conversation I think we had was it was a little early to tell, and that you need a few years to kind of really have data that would support that. But on the same token, I think there's definitely some data out there, and there's conversations, and there's experiences that kids are having in the class, and I think there's certainly enough to at least have some discussion as to how it's going, and philosophically, is this something we want to move forward on, especially in light of the fact that it might be limiting other areas of options. So I second what John said as well.
Can I just follow up on that? And the other thing is we could have a process in place to hear from the students of those. I mean, obviously we've seen that some students, and potentially many more if what we've heard about the nature of the dialogue with students over the course of the day was true, we're willing to come forth in the board meeting and talk about their experiences and various things. It would be good to hear about.
I would even, this is not the menu for it, but I actually feel that it's going to be something I was going to talk about later in the year, but I think we as a board should consider having a student liaison. I just think the student voice is missing in so many things that we do right now, and I think it's important.
And there is a provision, I think, in our policies to have one, if we chose to.
Okay, that's a good idea. So you have a lot to respond to, and the question is, do you want to respond to it now, or do you want to?
Well, I think there's, I certainly respond in general, and we're looking at a situation that in many ways isn't even 24 hours old, and I think we're all in the need to be able to reflect on what was said today. We need to be able to walk away and see what the meaning this has for us, for our implication for our schools, our students, our policy, and our practice. I appreciate the emotion that everyone has brought to the table, whether that be our students, the parents, of course, our wonderful teachers, and then the Board of Education as well. I just would really caution everybody to not respond in emotion, but give us the opportunity to be able to reflect on what the situation is and to be able to respond accordingly. Because in fairness, we have to have time to process this. To state that there's directives that are growing out of one conversation, to me is something that we need to consider and consider where they're coming from. Some of the comments that were made, I certainly can't speak to students being discouraged to participate, and looking to some of the students that I know in the audience, our administration is open to dialogue and certainly want to hear from students. So I welcome that conversation that I could be a part of, but certainly our school administration wants to be a part of any dialogue that could be had about student concerns and student issues. When we talk about communication with students and parents about course selections, I think it's very important to note the many, many comments that have been had about the course selection process and the tremendous level of enhanced communication and the documents that have been assembled to support that process, and where numerous parents have commented on the vast improvements in that area. And Mrs. Kerner, we did have a conversation on that subject as well. Again, and I hate being cliche, I hate that I'm going to use this phrase for a third time. I reject the notion that there are communication problems. And I would like to see specific examples of it. We've acknowledged one issue earlier this year that we addressed and we owned from the start. This is a situation that's going back with new concerns that have surfaced today. So as your superintendent, I want to know what those specific concerns are. We've enhanced communication across the district, whether that's from schools to parents, teachers to parents. There's been an effort, and of course, district to the broader community. So I think we need to hear specifics to be able to respond to that. You know, we respect everyone's opinion, but we need time to be able to reflect on this. We also need to be mindful of the fact of the point in time where we are in the year in enrolling students, and to be able to identify what our programs are, and to be able to plan accordingly for next year. Rash decisions that aren't thoughtful at this point have the potential of creating greater consequences than the concerns that have been presented tonight. So I ask that we be mindful and consider that as well. I think that there's been valuable discussion, and no one is discouraging or shying away from it. There's certainly no lack of ownership and no excuses that have been conveyed, but only the facts that we know them to be. And you're sharing a different perspective tonight. And as I said, that we need to take that perspective, and as a leadership team, see what that means to us and what that looks like in the context of the operations of the school. Course Latin program, of course students that want to take music and art, but within the context of the entire school as well. So we certainly, to be able to say that we're going to come back with this is a challenge at this point. But we need to identify what our thoughts are and certainly come back and respond to it.
Well, being mindful of the time, not just the time right now, but the time of year, it would seem that our next public board meeting, May 26th, that would be important for us to have another discussion about, at a minimum, the sort of health requirement. And if you're shaking your head, that sounds like it.
No, I just say,
we may not have time even.
No, the point I want to clarify, because we've used the title health a lot. Health is not the problem here.
It's the right.
Kids got to take health.
Right.
It's a combination of two courses that have been put together that we had discussion were approved by the board last year.
I have a motion. I'd like to move that we direct the administration to remove the requirement that health be taken in 9th grade, and to make it explicit that there is no requirement that health be taken in any year. That's my motion.
I second the motion.
Is there discussion? The discussion is the communication on this. May I
just
have the floor, please? The communication on this should have been done a long time ago. To say now that there isn't time or it's too late, that is a problem, because there was no communication with the board on this issue. And that's not the board's, that's the board's problem, but it's not the board's fault. At least not my problem. It might be the majority's of the board's problem. It tolerates the situation, but this stuff happens. And it's not a sufficient reason to postpone this decision, in my view. I'm done with my discussion.
So we have a motion on the floor. You actually want to, by fiat, tell the administration what to do tonight?
I ask one question.
Yes.
Where are we in terms of scheduling 9th graders, in terms of classes they signed up for, and where are we in that process?
At this point, we've entered into our system about 65 to 75% of that data.
It's possible to go back and talk to the 9th graders, is it not, and give them other options?
I mean, of course, anything's possible as far as that being effective practice within our time frame.
Yeah.
It's going to certainly slow down our ability to be able to put together a master schedule for this year.
It's just that these sorts of things need to be communicated to the board in advance, in my opinion.
I mean, we're probably talking 20 kids, right? So if the numbers are usually 60 plus, I mean, we still haven't gotten the numbers for 13, 14, and 12, 13, but the numbers of Latin, it seems like go down by about 20 plus kids. So that wouldn't be an unreasonable amount of kids to actually address the issue with.
All it takes is an email. All it takes is an email.
Can I ask a question? And Mr. Montgomery, I want to say this really to you, in that we're walking away from this and saying that we're going to reflect on this and we're going to report back. The idea of a directive isn't necessarily something that is going to enhance our practice or system in the school. If we go back and we look at the situation that is there and we come back with our thinking and our recommendations, there's still that opportunity for us to revisit this. That I'm not understanding the desire to be able to take that position, and then I think the adversarial nature in which it's done is concerning. There has been conversation about this, and I just caution the board about being very reactive. Your administrator,
The board, I think, would be happy to, this part of the board at least, would be happy to be proactive, but we haven't gotten support for doing that, nor have we gotten the information to be proactive. I think being proactive is much better than being reactive. But at this point, I think our back is against the wall in terms of time, and it needs to happen now if it's going to happen this year.
So the motion's on the table, so is there any more discussion before we vote?
Well, the one other point is, I mean, if time is the issue, it seems like maybe we should remove it for this year and then have this discussion in terms of what we want to do moving forward. I mean, I would certainly entertain that. I'm just concerned that you're saying time is the issue, so we're going to require these ninth graders to do something because we don't have time to figure out if they have more flexibility. So I'd rather flip it and say, okay, let's take the time we need, but let's take the restriction off of this current grade so they have more flexibility.
And it's not adversarial, it's the board's responsibility to make these decisions.
I don't think it's the board's responsibility to make a decision like this. Certainly they should have informed us, but to make a decision that has consequences that we don't necessarily fully appreciate.
But I think, I think it is the board's decision to decide if we want a restrictive environment in Irvington, and that's really concerning, that this should have been discussed. And granted, it wasn't, but in my view, there's been a series of things over the past few years that aren't discussed, and the answer is always, well, it's too late, or, we didn't do it, we'll do better next time. And I mean, at some point, I think when it really affects the kids and their options and what their transcript's going to look like for college, I would really like the kids to have an opportunity to come back and say, hey, I mean, and we could even put it out there and say, if you're interested, come see the administration, and then they could open discussions with them. It doesn't have to be, we throw everything in a loop, but it's such an important thing for them, and it seems like it's a really big decision for us to limit them in ninth grade. That's how I feel.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think,
No, I'm sorry, not now. Oh, there'll be plenty of other opportunities. It's just right now, while because there's a motion on the table, and, yeah.
I just want to say that regardless of the way that the board elects to vote, we don't have the opportunity to fully reflect on what those consequences are for that decision to lift that. So I can't respond to you. I don't know if Dave, Deb, and Raina can respond to you to know what the implications are from the scheduling system, from the process, the construction of the master schedule. I take exception to the fact of the accusations about communication, in that these were conversations that have been had in the past, and I would, let's deal with the issue. We're going to deal with the issue. We're going to come back and look to address it, but that simple action, that simple motion does not necessarily just in one pass make things different or better. Certainly different, but we can't be assured that makes things better. So we're in a process where, so that French, or the health piece again, is one piece of the equation. So lifting that requirement, and I'll say that with quotes, I don't know that necessarily changes anything for people in the room.
Well, I think that's the point. We're going to revert to where we were, rather than change something.
I'm not clear on what that means, though, because we're looking at a half-year course. The half-year course doesn't necessarily provide flexibility that resolves the concern that's been presented tonight.
I think in order to get the flexibility back, you'd have to address the writing program as well, which you've asked for.
And we don't understand, we don't
There
have
are
an understanding.
there are degrees of flexibility. You know, you have more and less. It's not a binary thing. And this is more flexibility than if you required health in 9th grade. If you didn't have writing, that would further increase the flexibility, et cetera. But it doesn't mean, I think we unfortunately can't take comments from the floor. But yeah. Okay, so that's the
Discussion complete?
discussion complete.
All in favor?
We're voting? I mean,
Yeah,
okay,
because it's a motion to-
what about my suggestion, before we vote on this, what about my suggestion that we...
But,
But
just to be clear, there's a...
in lieu of voting,
But
my
we,
question- but
no,
my
because he
question
made
to
the
John
motion
is
and
in
you
lieu of
said,
voting.
I'm sorry, but
We can withdraw the motion.
What's the suggestion?
can he withdraw the motion?
suggestion is that-
Yeah, all right.
That we allow this current 9th grade, if they have concerns or they would like more flexibility, to revisit their schedules, and that we allow Raina and Chris a little more time to come back to us as they have asked for, and then at that point, we,
Well, that could all be accomplished by just undoing this thing and letting that go forward. I think we can pass this motion, and then all that can proceed.
we're not gonna pass this motion.
I'd like to have a vote
Okay,
on it.
that's fine.
Anyway.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
so all in favor of John's motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 2.
I'm a nay.
Okay.
Right. So there we are.
We need 3 to pass.
Okay. The vote needs 3 people. You have to have a majority of the total board, which is 3. And so we didn't have that. We only had 2.
I'm not
so
going
it's
to
not passed.
vote to change curriculum on a whim.
No, this isn't a public exchange.
Yeah.
So can we,
Excuse me, Claire, I understand, I know why I'm voting the way I'm voting. If you want me to explain, I can say it again. I'm voting this way because I do not believe it is good policy for a board to overturn an administration when there hasn't even been any discussion about it. And I think that we don't have to have the vote tonight. We can have another discussion. We can schedule another board meeting next week if we need to. Just to, no, I'm explaining myself.
it's not that point. in
You
the
can
agenda.
stay and,
You've moved on.
yeah, I think we need to move on because we had a motion, we voted, motion failed to pass, but the point has been made.
My question is, am I allowed to speak or not?
No,
Not at this time.
you had 3 times. I was being facetious.
So we move on. with our-
All right, so we
So
can,
no, is anyone allowed?
no, because we moved back to board. All right? We need to move on with our agenda. It's 10 after 9. The community, the people in this room have absolutely been heard, and just because the motion didn't pass tonight does not mean that the voices have not been heard.
Can I just ask if the suggestion that there be a meeting with students is going to be part of the follow-up, because that didn't get mentioned again in the past?
Good idea.
I think it's a good idea.
All the suggestions that were made, there were numerous suggestions, definitely have been written down and will be dealt with as quickly as we can.
Can I just say one other comment? And this is that I think we all, really appreciate the quality of the dedication of our faculty members, and in this case particularly Sella and Mr. Silverman, and they've obviously meant a great deal to certain members of my family, and many others, I believe, as well. And so we just want to extend that appreciation.
Okay?
And just to, I'm sorry, I just want to reiterate, we said it because it's really important, which is, That motion as of tonight went down, but that doesn't mean that there still could be decisions that come out over
Absolutely.
the next few weeks. So I wouldn't say it's over. I would say it's a conversation that's going to continue, even though the motion went down.
Right.
I just wanted to.
Okay.
It doesn't prejudice anything in terms of future decisions.
All right, so we are going to move on to our next item, Clara's frown notwithstanding, which is,
Never mind.
sorry,
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
the next item on our discussion is on the presentation is actually the Irvington Middle School presentation from David Sotile.
Yeah, so as much as I would like the board and administration to be committed to getting through the agenda, I would appreciate a couple minutes of an adjournment while we set up for the presentation.
Okay.
And
All right, we'll take a few.
I think it'd be good for us to regroup and be able to focus on this presentation.
All right, let's take a few minutes to adjourn then. Ready to rock and roll?
I want to thank everybody for softening you guys up.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. Thank you, David. Well done.
I didn't get any questions. We're all exhausted.
Yeah, so if I may, as the board and public should be aware, we've been working through a series of wonderful, uplifting presentations from our respective school administrations. And tonight, we have the good pleasure to hear from our middle school leadership team, Mr. Sotile, our principal, and Ms. Daly, our assistant principal. And we are eager and anxious to hear your fine words about your wonderful school and children tonight. So the floor is yours, my wonderful colleagues.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. Thank the board. Thanks to the public for being here. It's great always to have a chance to talk a little bit about the work that's going on at our school, the experiences of our students. And so will hopefully be a relatively succinct fashion, but informative one. It will be our pleasure to share a little bit about our work tonight.
It's not on. It's not on behind us.
Oh, that one screen went out.
That screen went out.
That's all right.
So I'm exploring the possibilities of
Okay, I thought you were looking
No.
into it.
We can just turn a little bit?
So just to begin, a little bit of basics. You see our enrollments up there, and not to talk at any length about them. That range, that 130 to 140, mid-140s range has been pretty consistent for us over the last several years. The one number that I do want to call some attention to on the slide, though, is the number of shared staff, number of shared teachers in particular. That's one of the facts of life at the middle school that we've become quite accustomed to over the last number of years is I would say challenges, the opportunities in some cases, but certainly the reality of scheduling with a large number of teachers, almost just shy of a third, pardon me, of teachers who teach somewhere else in the district at some point in their day. And certainly that plays a role in considerations that we have to make when building our schedule.
Someone's gotta stand up and tell them what
I don't know what that is. I have no idea what that is.
Turn your volume down.
I don't know how.
You have a window open?
Bizarre.
She has no window open.
I don't know. It wasn't even open. Sorry, David.
That's okay. So just
It was. I wonder what that was.
That was not part of the presentation, but it's nice background kind of
But you saw I didn't open another window? That was bizarre. Go ahead. Sorry.
I know the board over the last couple of weeks has seen presentations from both Dow's and the Main Street School, and has been some discussion of theories of action within the district and how they've come to life at those schools. And so, just a minute to get us started here, when you see this slide called Theories in Action, it really is how those come to life. And one of the things that I think is really important to acknowledge is the fact that none of our theories exist in isolation. They exist in support and service of one another. And you see here in this little cyclical diagram, the idea of rigorous, authentic learning experiences, which is rooted in our first theory of action, those are supported by those pillars of professional learning for our teachers, the process of reflection and feedback, and that's how we bring those rigorous, authentic learning experiences to life. But similarly, the experiences of engaging in them and implementing such experiences then provide fodder for additional feedback, additional reflection, and the ability to continue that cycle and always make it an improving one. That's our goal, and hopefully over the course of the discussion in the next few minutes, you'll see some of how that comes to life and also how that process kind of is iterative, or reiterative, pardon me, as we get to the end of our presentation. So with that, Ms. Daly.
Thank you, everyone. So one of the ways that we ensure that we have rigorous, authentic learning experiences happening in our classrooms is to build our collective capacity as a group of professionals. And one way that we do that is to focus on ongoing rich professional learning all year long. And we have many systemic structures, some of which you see on the screen or the slide in front of you, that we have where teachers have opportunities to engage in those rich professional learning experiences. One that I'll talk about for a minute is Superintendent's Conference Days. This year, for example, we've had 2 full days where the focus was really on instructional design, which I know has been the focus of previous board meeting topics. And as part of that instructional design, what our teachers have been busy doing, particularly on those 2 professional release days, is to really focus on articulating curriculum, both horizontally and vertically, K to 12, in the development and the refinement of their units of study across all of our academic disciplines and courses. So that's been really important and rich work. The UBD framework, which you see on the slide before you, is the framework we're using, Understanding by Backwards Design. And Rubicon Atlas is our repository for having all of that rich curriculum stored and shared between schools and grade levels. We also have at IMS, like the other schools, building base structures that are in place that also provide ongoing opportunities for professional learning. At IMS, what we did was we looked at the theory of action, actually Theory 2, which was about professional learning, and we really targeted it on specific areas that we've been really studying and researching as part of our professional learning this year with our staff. And that really has to do with the ideas of weaving rich discussion and divergent questions into our lessons and learning activities, with the goal of students developing the dispositions of flexible thinking, problem solving, and effective communication. We're very lucky at IMS that we have common planning times where our grade level teams meet. One of the uses of those common planning times is our grade level learning sessions that David and I facilitate with our teachers. This year, again, those sessions have been focused on incorporating divergent questioning and discussion into lessons on a daily basis. Some of the work that we've been doing during those sessions include teachers actually sharing elements or practices that they're using in the classroom, and also accompanied by student work and getting feedback. I can give you an example. Recently at our eighth grade learning session, one of our teachers is trying out the concept of writing partnerships in her writing workshop and trying to make students really engage in discussions with one another about their writing and providing feedback. So she shared her practice and she received targeted feedback from her colleagues, which then she turned around and implemented. And a part of our grade level learning sessions also is asking everyone who's part of that dialogue to think about how the work and the discussion will actually impact their own classroom practice. So that's just one example of a building-based structure that we use. So what David and I thought would be really helpful was thinking about that IMS theory of action related to discussion and divergent questioning in the classroom, and give you a few snapshots of how that might look on a daily basis in our different academic classes. So I was going to speak to ELA, but I need to say that as a new member of the IMS staff this year, what's been really evident to me is that even though I'm just going to speak about ELA, is that the notion of rich discussion in classrooms is in every classroom, including unified arts, every classroom in our building. In ELA, for example, there's been a focus on Costa's levels of inquiry or levels of thinking, which, if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, it's similar in terms of pushing students to engage in those higher levels of thinking. So I'll give you one example. Recently, visiting a 7th grade classroom that was engaged in one of our reading units of study. The students were reading historical fiction texts of their own choosing, and accompanied by that is a writing unit where they were researching the event or timeline that was represented in their text, and they were doing a research on that event or topic. And as part of their research process, they were actually coming up with guiding research questions that really targeted those 3 different levels of inquiry. And we think of those 3 levels of inquiry. The first sort of layer would be literal level questions, questions that could be answered simply in the text. The second layer would be more inferential type of questioning and thinking. And the third, which is the ultimate goal, which is more of the application type of higher level thinking that we want students doing. And when I was visiting the classroom on this day, students were actually in small groups. They had already completed like a list of some different research questions, and they were actually engaging in discussion with one another, sharing their questions, and really identifying where those questions fell in terms of the levels of thinking. And it was really interesting to hear them note that, you know, if there were when they were first just studying a topic, they needed to actually have some level 1 questions to just sort of know the basics, but really the emphasis was more on those higher level questioning. So again, that's just one example of one classroom on one given day, but it was promoting all those skills that we want students doing. David?
You're not going to get away without me just mentioning very quickly social studies. That's just the way that it is. You know, there's an example up there of a piece of student work on a recent task that asked students to consider the question, Andrew Jackson, hero or wanted? And really, I think that's a great example of the value of questioning combined with the acquisition of content knowledge and really getting students to apply that knowledge. Students had to analyze historical evidence and use that as a means to support a position on whether Andrew Jackson was truly a hero of the United States or whether he should have been put in jail for some of the actions he took in office, and then represent that in some way or another. They worked together to discuss that, to exchange ideas, to support their notion with historical evidence, looking at primary source documents and so forth. And so really, I think a great example of some of the work that Allison referred to in our grade level sessions as well as our faculty meetings, using that question to organize and build deeper understanding. As we go across some of our other content areas, that same premise continues. One of the things that's going on in one of our math classes right now, in fact, is the consideration of the question of how do we make sense of our world? And again, taking this idea of looking at a deep understanding of mathematical concepts, in this case statistical analysis, and using that to actually answer the question of, what is the impact of gender bias or what have you, and considering questions, but using mathematical data, compiling data, analyzing that data, using the statistical methods that they've had to learn and develop a deeper understanding of, is an example of the value of questioning as a means to really get students to apply their knowledge once they've acquired it and therefore demonstrate a deeper understanding. Similarly, in science, science is very much a hands-on hands-on inquiry-based learning activity across our grade levels, in the laboratory experiments that students engage in the way in which they engage with content through their reading and literacy tasks in the science class. Students are constantly having to support a response to a question with evidence and then design methods of ascertaining those answers. As Allison mentioned earlier, in our Unified Arts program, one of the things that we want students to do in the middle school is really to have a very well-rounded experience so that we can truly address the needs of the whole child. And you see the rotating classes that students take up there, in addition to phys ed, the classes of art and health and home and careers and drama and technology. All of these are courses that students take over their time in the middle school. Talking a little bit about technology and the focus on the engineering and design process that students are engaged in 7th grade, moving on to robotics and programming. There's work on coding that's being done there, and certainly we look forward to the implementation of Project Lead the Way as a way to move that program to its next level. When we think about our music program, we think about it with a great deal of pride. The participation rate that we have in those performing groups is enormous and truly something that makes our school, I think, a very special place. In each of those groups, we also have opportunities for students to deepen their participation, to go beyond the participation in the larger ensemble with auditioned groups, and they're listed up there for you to see. Certainly a focus at the middle school, as it has been across the district, is ways in which we can use technology to enhance the educational experience. And that's really a very important thing for us to consider. When we think about technology, we really need to be thinking about it as something that can allow us to do something that we wouldn't be able to do without it. Otherwise, it's just a toy. So when we think about Google Apps for Education, one of the slides earlier on talked about PD teams, or professional development teams, as one of our professional learning structures. Well, we've been most fortunate to have a group of staff members who have served as our Google Apps PD team. And what they've done is they've supported not only their own learning on how to use Google Apps for Education, but the learning of their colleagues. And the outgrowth of that has been a great deal of use of the Google Suite, whether it be Google Docs, whether it be Google Classroom being piloted in by many of our teachers. And these are tools that students are using for collaboration with one another, for an easier acquisition of feedback and engagement with their teachers, whether that be in class or out of class. And the Google Classroom is a natural outgrowth of that as well. So they're things that we're very excited about. I won't go through all of these items, but I will also just mention the I Do program, which has been in place at the middle school now for several years. Again, a way in which we integrate technology into not only the daily routines for a student, but into instruction in a way that we're helping students develop a plan for organization when the traditional plans have been challenging for them. So it's an approach to organization that tries to go more and more paperless for students, give them digital ways in which to organize all of the different things that they have to do across a middle school day, and bring about that idea of self-reliance that we seek to build in students as they go through middle school.
So David just mentioned our goal is to really focus on the whole child. So a part of that, and you heard Joyce speak about it last week, is the character building work that we do. And all of our work that is part of that is really built upon the K-12 framework. And you see the 5 essential questions that the district has for character education listed there. We have some specific character programs that we use at IMS that are special to IMS, and I thought I would talk about our CBF, our Character Building Facilitators Program, which is our liaison with the high school students. Deb Marinello and I work very closely. We have high school students, juniors and seniors, who apply to be our CBFs, and when they're chosen, it's a rather rigorous process. We work on developing their leadership skills in special training sessions, and then they visit our middle school homeroom classrooms 4 times a year. And the work that they did this year with our middle school students was really targeted around the essential question, what defines who we are? And they have sessions that, based on student interest, what middle schoolers feel would really be helpful to hear about from their peers, really focuses on the work that we do in those sessions. So for example, some of the specific work we did related to that essential question this year was about problem solving and how we solve problems. One specific example was just about time management and how do you deal with those challenges as a middle school student. So I also wanted to thank the IDF, who supports both our CBF and our SAIL. That's another leadership program at the middle school. So thank you to those 2 groups. And I also want to recognize that character building, that's one of our professional development teams as well. We have a district team and a building-based team who engages in that professional work with myself and plans these types of activities. Related to character education and the notion of really educating the whole child are the rich extracurricular opportunities that are offered at the middle school. I know at an earlier board meeting we talked about the importance of clubs at the middle school level, and one of the things I think we're most proud of about our clubs is that they're really based on student interest. This year, for example, we had several students put forth proposals on club ideas that they were passionate about. One of those resulted in our geography club this year. And again, when we think about clubs, we think about clubs that promote academics, those that promote service and leadership, and those that are more social in nature. And a lot of our clubs actually merge a couple of those items together. We just had, for example, today a fundraiser sponsored by our Spanish club that raised money. Children bought sombreros in recognition or celebration of Cinco de Mayo, and they are going to be sharing that money with a foundation in Mexico that actually supports families in need. And that's just one example of the rich work our clubs do. And the other one I wanted to mention was just our athletic programs, which again, just affords students opportunities to make choices and try things at middle schoolers. We have both intramurals, and then we have interscholastic activities, modified sports teams at the 7th and 8th grade level.
You know, we really couldn't talk about the work at the middle school without talking about the partnerships that we have with our two great partners, the IEF, the PTSA, and the opportunities that they bring about that are really unlike any other. You know, we can go down the list here and talk about the ways that they've applied to each of our grade levels, whether that be our Jacob Burns opportunities for both 6th and 7th graders, our Shakespeare residency, which is ongoing right now for our 8th graders. But they are getting students out there into places that are you know, unfamiliar, that are different than the everyday classroom. This week, for instance, the PTSA will be supporting the visit from a Civil War historian who will bring with him some of those primary source and artifact objects that students will get to engage with and use to learn more deeply about the experiences in history. All of these, though, you know, are efforts that are aimed at providing something that is rich, that is meaningful, that is authentic, and that gives students a chance to engage with the content that they're learning in a way that causes them to think about it, to have to ponder it, to have to argue about it in certain cases, and come to a place of understanding that is deeper than would otherwise be the case. And I have to say, I couldn't talk about a year at the middle school without expressing just you know, the incredible appreciation that we have for both of these organizations and the generosity that they bestow upon us. And then finally, you know, one of the other things about that we want to say is unique, although I know all schools do trips, but we think a lot about the trips that we take and the experiences that we provide students beyond the walls of Irvington Middle School. If you look there, there's a list of one trip from each grade, and certainly it's not the only thing that kids do, but each of them is profound in its own way. When you think about 6th graders early on in their year, a day in the life of the Hudson in collaboration with our high school classes, and this idea of collecting data and then drawing conclusions about what's going on in the Hudson River right in their own backyard, whether it be the 7th grade trip to Sharp Reservation, which is all about team building, which is all about this idea of problem solving through collaboration. You see students on one of the courses there in a photo. And then, of course, one of our great culminating experiences, it was perfectly timed with the helicopter flying through the air there at the Jefferson Memorial, but our 8th grade trip to D.C., which is a staple and certainly something that brings a group of students together and forms a bond that carries on after we return. Finally, you know, here's the question, I think, to bring us back to where we started, and we talked about authentic learning experiences that were fed by professional learning and fed by reflection and feedback, and then those experiences themselves bringing us back to this idea for this opportunity for greater reflection, more feedback, and therefore improved learning and improved experiences going forward. I know last week when Ms. Chapnick presented from the Main Street School, she shared with you one of the ways in which we know, one of the ways in which we measure the performance that's happening and what the results are in the classroom. She talked about a classroom observation. She referenced the framework for teaching, which is our instrument by which we measure instruction and teacher practice. Another way in which we do that beyond the traditional full period classroom observation is through a series of walkthroughs. And what you see here is just a snippet of some feedback from a walkthrough that we do at the middle school. And really quickly, it's just a visit to a classroom that's about 15 minutes in length. Some feedback is given to the teacher relative to an area from the framework for teaching, and questions are posed for further reflection, which is done in writing by the teacher and provided back to the administrator. It's one of a number of different ways in which we look at the work that's being done, look at the impact that it's having on students and their work, engage with teachers through this observation evaluation, but really reflection and growth process, which is really what our effort is and our aim is in this process, to help build that capacity. I know Allison had one fun.
And another way that we sort of tie together those three theories and really look at how successful students are is something called instructional rounds. And as part of our administrative council, we meet biweekly, and we have instructional rounds as part of all those meetings. And what that incorporates is whoever is the building host, we visit classrooms in that building. So for example, we just had our recent rounds at IMS last week, and we were really having our colleagues, when they visited classrooms, really think about our particular theory, which has to do with the divergent questioning and the discussion. And that's the lens that our colleagues are looking through. They're able to gather data. What are students doing? What are students saying that reflects that theory? Then we're able to come back, debrief as colleagues, and tomorrow at our faculty meeting, we'll be sharing all that evidence with our staff, and we did that on our prior instructional rounds earlier this winter, and staff is then able to ascertain what patterns are they noticing, what's common experiences are students having, what's the impact of this work, what are our next steps for instruction. So that was just a way to sort of tie together those three theories: student learning, professional learning, and feedback.
So thank you very much, and with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Great presentation. Start with some questions from the board.
Who wants to go first?
I have a few. I don't have a lot. Thank you. Interesting, as always. And could you just tell me what you mean when you say rigorous, authentic?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
When you say rigorous, authentic learning experiences, what do you mean?
You know, I think...
Is that a particular thing, or is it... Can you just explain?
So, sure. So, you know, the way that I would look at a rigorous, authentic learning experience is where the work is being done by the students. The heavy lifting of thinking, of analysis, of response is being done by students rather than students giving back something that's been given to them.
Is that the authentic part or the rigorous part, or is it?
Well, it's a combination of the two, I think. I think authentic can deal, depending on the subject matter, might look a little bit different or feel a little bit different if you're talking about, for instance, a science class where students are engaged in inquiry about a particular scientific experiment where they're designing the experiment. Well, that's authentic in the sense that you're being asked to think like a scientist, right? So that's a little bit, I guess, of how I might apply it. And I might apply it that way in other content areas as well. But ultimately, it's about students giving out a lot more than was given to them. That makes something rigorous to me.
Okay, so it's a little bit more about the student being a more active agent in his or her education than really just kind of absorbing information.
And being asked to apply that, right, yes. I guess if that's what you mean by being more active.
Yeah, well, applying is a way to be more active, so I guess, yeah, I don't know which is the right, but yeah, okay. Thank you. Sorry, I have to flip because I just kind of note things on the slides as we go along. Just on the unified arts, are those, are aspects of that you had under that heading, art, health, home careers, drama, technology, are any or all of those state requirements that we're satisfying there, or are some of them discretionary things that the district decides to do?
With the exception of drama, they're all state requirements.
Okay, so it's up to us how we satisfy them, but we have to have them offer a certain amount of it in middle school.
There has to be a certain amount of credits, the state would call them, or units, I guess. They don't really call them credits. And in terms of how we satisfy them, there's certainly some latitude, but there are standards that have to be met, and performance indicators that are yeah.
Written down by the state somewhere.
Correct.
Okay, good. Can you talk, have you thought at all about in the technology area, the Initiative for Digital Organization stuff? How do you have any issues with, I know from a former parent of middle schoolers, this can be an issue, with the distractions that digital devices produce? And, you know, I mean, it's great for them to be able to do all this stuff digitally, but, you know, there's a lot of fun things you can do on your tablet or your phone or your computer too, and how do you, does it end up, how do you know that it's a net positive for them educationally?
Well, so, you know, I think that's a good question, John. I think, you know, and thanks really for bringing that up, because I feel like it's one of those questions that hangs out there anytime you introduce technology into the classroom. And so there's a couple of things for me. One is, when you ask, how do you know it's a net positive? Well, one of the ways that I would know is, are students engaging in something or producing something that they would otherwise not be able to produce? If we didn't introduce the technology, are they not able to collaborate in a certain way? Are they not able to get interaction in a certain way that they are able to do with the technology? So that's the way we might analyze. And I would say that when teachers are considering the use of technology in their classroom, that would be a question that they would be considering. They would say, so what are, you know, if I didn't have the technology, how, you know, what would I not get that I'm going to get now, or what, that I'm hoping to get now?
Okay, so that's, I mean, that's not exactly, figuring out the distraction is probably hard because you can't supervise minute by minute what kids are doing, but it does kind of speak to a nice discipline about when technology might be a positive.
Right. Two other things I'd say. One real quick. You know, the idea of distraction has been a problem ever since, you know, students were able to make paper airplanes and you know, or doodle.
1903.
or doodle, or whatever the case might be, right? You know, and so I would say that certainly technology provides, you know, avenues for distraction, but so do you know, 18th century technologies as well.
Right.
Finally, though, because you mentioned IDO, the Initiative for Digital Organization, I just want to differentiate that from some of the other, like the BYOD and so forth, because the IDO program is really for a targeted group of students to aid with a level of organizational need that they have that we're looking to build upon.
I see. There are students identified who want to get extra support in that
Like
area.
504s or...
Right, and I know that there are, you know, yeah, okay, right, okay. I didn't understand that it was targeted.
Yeah.
But good, okay. That's all the question I have, thank you.
Just a few, not many. Wait, the same thing, I read on it too. I gotta go back. With regards to also the Unified Arts page, I think we talked about this before, but is there, I believe we're looking at some of the curriculum for some of those Unified Arts class, or, I mean, I guess my question is, when are we planning, or are we planning to kind of revisit those curricula and see if we can enhance some of those areas?
So, you know, I would say that that's ongoing as we do the curriculum work across the district, as we've done work to begin to deepen our understanding of instructional design and asking teachers who are teaching a content area that's not changing to think about, well, what is it that should or could change? What is it about the experience for students that we'd want to change, or the outcomes for students that we want to change? And I think that last part, that outcome piece, is a place for us of real opportunity. And I would say, for instance, we talk about a home and careers class. One of the questions that has arisen as we've discussed curriculum in that class is, so what do we want students to walk away with from this class? This class is mandated and it has a curriculum, or at least standards that we've got to adhere to and align with. But what is the big idea? And what is it that students should be walking away with that they should be taking with them and possibly and hopefully really applying elsewhere and transferring to another part of their life? So this idea of self-reliance is something that comes to mind. And being able to make decisions about whether it's food, whether it's clothing, whether it's a household budget, whether it's the decisions regarding careers or interests that one might want to pursue in support of a particular career. What are the skills necessary to be self-reliant, or at least to grow in the area of self-reliance in that way? And so that would be an example of a way that we're not changing the content, but we are trying to think about, I think, a little bit more deeply about what the outcomes for students that we want are. And so it doesn't become about completing a project and you know, sewing a pillow or anything like that. It's about what is it the thinking we want students to engage in that they would then apply to any new situation, an unfamiliar one.
Okay. I don't see mention of study skills class on here. Is that part, would you consider that part of the Unified Art program, or how does that fit in there?
It's a good question. You know, and I would say it's not part of the Unified Arts, but it does fit in. It's actually part of our transition for our 6th grade students, as you know. And again, I would say similarly to my response to the last question, that's some of the work that's been going on this year is looking at study skills and saying, so how does it link with being a 6th grader? I mean, if you think about being a 6th grader, you think about going from this world in which you're with one teacher all day long, who is a great support to you in your organization and kind of keeping your world together, going to 6th grade and having that kind of be splintered into 8 or 9 different parts. And so the two-pronged effort with regard to study skills is about saying, what are the skills that we want students to go to 7th grade with so that they're going to be able to practice those skills on their own? And so that's thinking about articulating what does it look like to be a 7th grader down through 6th grade. And also, how does that relate to being a 6th grader? So when you're thinking about, for instance, note-taking skills as a 6th grader, well, it makes no sense at all for a 6th grader to be learning note-taking skills in isolation from the notes that they might have to take for, say, social studies. And so one of the things you might see if you walk into a study skills class is you might see students looking at social studies content and going through a note-taking exercise to build the skills that they'll been able to, that they will then be able to apply, say, in their content area class.
Right. I mean, it's funny, those two, the home and careers and the study skills are the two areas that, just as a board member, I seem to get the most comments about. People concerned about, where is it going, or how is it evolving, and what's happening with it. So, I just had a question about the music program, and just not familiar. So I know how it works in orchestra, but in chorus, but like if you're in jazz ensemble, which I guess is above and beyond, when is that? Is that you pulled out also from classes, or is it a separate part of the day?
The jazz ensemble meets as a lesson group, so students that are in the jazz ensemble don't meet for a separate instrumental lesson.
Oh, okay.
They meet for a jazz ensemble lesson.
Okay.
Right, so it takes
it
the
works
place
the
of that.
same way. I thought, okay, it's just in lieu of that, then, okay, thanks. And then I had a question about the technology education in your coding, engineering, and robotics. I mean, I know engineering and robotics are definitely part of the kind of required sequence, the electives that they go through, but is coding part of that as well now? It's part of an elective, or is it part of a program before or after school?
No, it's actually part of the 8th grade program, so students will actually do coding for part of the semester and then the robotics for the other part of the semester. They kind of link together.
Okay, and is that part of Project Lead the Way?
Well, it'll be enhanced under Project Lead the Way, yes.
Oh, so it's not, right, the coding piece is not, it's something that you put in on your own?
Correct.
We don't have Project Lead the Way in middle school yet, right?
Not yet.
The robotics piece is from Project Lead the Way.
Oh, is it?
No, it's,
I thought you said it was going to be, no?
It will be.
right, will be.
Yes.
It's not, right now, there's
Oh, right,
nothing
I'm
at the middle
sorry.
school
Yeah.
that's Project Lead the Way.
Okay, but it will be. And the engineering design process will also be the Project
And the
Lead Way,
robotics
right?
won't be for 2 years.
Okay. So it's 50-50? They get half a year of coding and half a year of...
Well, technology in 8th grade is a 10-week course. That's
Okay.
every other day, so it stretches over a semester. So they get basically half of the course is the coding and programming, and then the robotics.
Okay, thanks. And I guess my last question is twofold. It's about clubs. And I know we just finished budget season, but my question is, as we think about next year in budgeting, is this an area where you see there's an increased need for funding in terms of, is there more demand for clubs, or do you find that it's that some clubs cycle out and some clubs cycle in?
So, one of my favorite statistics to cite is, the first week on the job here in 2009, I went over to the business office to learn kind of the ropes of how to handle the purchasing process, and I got to know, by the way, your club budget last year was about $50,000, and next year you've got to cut it to $35,000. So,
Remember that year.
right. So our club budget this year is about $36,000. So,
Really?
So thankfully the board has restored funding over the last couple of years. You've added funding going into next year. Could we use more funding and more club opportunities? Sure. I think we always get requests and so forth. That doesn't mean we can support them all. And I would say that I think what we've done a nice job of is we've been able to build our clubs where there's real interest, where there's a really good idea, where there's a willing advisor who can really take hold of the club and make it into a good experience for students. I don't think we've reached saturation point yet. I'm not sure when we will. I know we've already got some ideas percolating for the funding that's going to be in the budget for next year. So I'm eagerly awaiting that opportunity. We may be asking for more next year, but that's yet to be seen right
And
now. Those are, by the way,
what happened with the debate club?
those are a sampling of clubs.
Yeah.
Those are not
Okay.
all the clubs that we
Okay,
offer.
is the debate club still happening?
The debate club is happening, right, but that's one of those that may be added as an actual club next year. It was kind of started as an ad hoc kind of a thing.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
Quick question on the goals for ELA. My daughter, 7th grade, what should I expect that the skill that she'll have at the end of 7th grade, and then how does that change at the end of 8th grade? So as she goes into 8th grade and she proceeds through 8th grade, what are the writing skills in particular that would be different at the end of 8th grade versus 7th grade? And how has that changed under Common Core?
I think that part of the work on the unit revision has to do over the past few years with really aligning all the units of study, K-12 and literacy, to really be Common Core aligned. And as you know, as part of Common Core, the expectation is that children be proficient at 3 different types of writing: informational writing, argumentative, and narrative. So they have experiences with those 3 different genres, but of course in each genre there's many subgenres. And so over the course of their K-12 academic experience is they'll have different types, subgenres within those genres. So I would say when you think about your daughter, and you think about her as a 7th grade writer, and then you think about her as an 8th grade writer, I think some of the differences are really going to be, one, just sheer volume in terms of the demands is going to increase. But I think like a really big piece from 7th to 8th is the level of critical analysis that students need to do, comparing texts and then being thoughtful and writing about those. That seems to be one of the greatest challenges. But again, all those other aspects of writing, like grammar and vocabulary, those will continue as part of her 8th grade and all 8th grade curriculum.
And so that the ELA teachers are balancing grammar with the, yes.
To weave that all in. And I think one of the great assets of the Common Core is it makes it very clear who's responsible to teach what at each grade level. There's a great deal of clarity, which then has informed the instructional design.
And do you think we're, this is going back a little bit to our Latin discussion, we are doing enough in sort of basic grammar? If you had your druthers as educators, would you have more grammar in the middle school in particular?
I think that grammar is actually quite evident to me at the middle school level, and I can say that because I've been in other school districts where it's been a little bit less evident. I think what we know is that the best grammar instruction is grammar that's embedded in both your reading and your writing experiences, and looking at text through both the lenses of a reader and writer, and then having opportunities to model that for students and to have expectations that they are reflecting on their use of grammar. It's actually a recent conversation with a teacher just about grammar. So I think teachers are making a real concerted effort to embed it.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Nice job, guys. Very, very informative.
All right, another meaty subject, field testing. How should we proceed with this? Do you want to give us a quick summary of what you've learned?
Since our last public discussion, I've received a communication that I'm looking to try to put my fingers on at this moment from Mr. Steve Katz, who happens to be the director of the Office of Assessment at the State Education Department. In this memorandum, Mr. Katz reiterates the state's position about a school district's responsibility to administer state tests. As the board is aware, we reviewed this memo, which is specifically and notably addressed to me. The letter in itself inaccurately represents a decision that the administration nor the board has taken, and in doing so, it suggests that we made the decision to not administer the earth science field test at the high school this year, when in fact my communication, both verbally and in writing to SED, was asking for the rationale towards our requirement and to administer, and what the consequences were if we did not administer. In fact, that through 3 phone calls and 4 email correspondences, I did not get those questions answered. However, this letter identifies a series of federal requirements in Section 100 of law, of Commissioner's regulations, and also looking other sections related to both separately elementary and high school. And in reviewing these, not only with the board but with our legal counsel, there is the understanding that this letter could be perceived as a directive from the Commissioner of Education or from State Education Department, and therefore, if the district was to not administer field tests, there is the potential of having consequences. And as identified by code and also by our legal counsel, the potential consequences could include removal of board officials, removal of the superintendent, and the potential prospect of the loss of some state aid, which is not clear. Therefore, that interpretation and guidance that has been provided by our attorneys, I think, has shifted some of the conversation that we've had in this room, where we still don't see the same value in field testing. I think we need to maybe pause and consider what our position is on this subject.
And what else did you learn from our sister districts who, did they get these same letters?
Yeah, so I reached out to, and I don't want to name districts,
Right.
but we have a number of districts in the Lower Hudson Valley that have opted out of field testing, and in doing so, some formally notified SED in writing. Others didn't say a word, and when the test came, they marked them return to sender and sent them back to SED. In those cases, I can tell you, I only know of 2 of about 5 districts that have confirmed with me that actually received letters like this. Other 3 districts have not received these letters.
Right.
So it's inconsistent from SED. I think the one thing that we should consider is, why did we get a letter and other people didn't? And some of those folks that didn't get a letter specifically wrote a letter to SED saying they were not going to administer field tests. And those superintendents have told me, or I can think of one specifically, that they did not receive such correspondence. The response from other districts is varied. One that said they received the letter said, that's fine, we got the letter, and we're just ignoring the letter. Other folks are taking a more liberal view than maybe we're prepared to do at this time.
Mm-hmm.
One of our neighboring districts, I should say, isn't administering field tests at the high school, but is open to administering field tests at the elementary school. So they have a kind of a split decision there, but they did not get an SED letter, though.
Do we know the other district that received the letter? Do we know what their situation was? Like, did they write they weren't, or were they hedging, like kind of just looking for information like we were, or?
I believe they wrote letters indicating that they were not going to participate.
They were not. So bizarre.
Yeah, so there's, I think I started my comments tonight by talking about the madness associated with SED. This is another example of, I think, inconsistency. What worries me, if rather than inconsistent, that this could be deliberate, and that we're on someone's radar at this point in
Right,
time.
right.
And they're looking to make an example out of a high-achieving, successful school district that, a headline about Irvington would draw some
Right,
attention.
and the advice we've been given is that this is a directive, and a directive is something that we're expected to follow.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Even if there's no specific statute that backs it up.
Correct.
Yeah. I guess, any other comments? I mean, I think we've decided that as a board, we're not going to recommend opting out of field testing, correct?
Right. I mean, I think.
Unless anybody's changed their mind since.
I think, yeah, I think the issue of it, every family has a right to do whatever they feel comfortable doing.
Right.
They'll test, they test. I think we were gonna, we're comfortable with that. Every family has their own right to opt in or out as they wish.
Right.
But based on the letter, I kind of thought we kind of all agreed it seemed to up the stakes a little bit, and it might not be worth going down there right now.
And we should also point out, there's no standard, there's no set objective in terms of percentage of students that taking the exam, so that's,
Right.
you know.
But I'd just say that, and I think it's important for the board to be on record that, you know, we're moving forward in administering the field tests in the spirit of the directive that we've received, and the board nor administration is encouraging people not to not have their children attend school for this, but understand that individuals have the freedom to make whatever choices they
Exactly,
want.
we're not, it's, right, not encouraging or discouraging as a board, I think, we're just saying everyone has the right to make their own decision.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that said, it is, these tests go for 45 minutes, I believe, and
Right.
it's kind of hard to just miss that particular amount of school, so we don't want to encourage people to miss more school either.
Yep. Okay.
Very good. We'll prepare SED correspondence to speak to this letter and also look to have some communication with our parent community to keep them well informed.
All right, so we move on to our curriculum, our committee reports, and we can start off with our curriculum committee report from our lone curriculum committee member here.
Yes, and as I said before, I almost think we covered the curriculum committee in the board meeting last week, because we really talked about the world language report, which we talked about in the meetings, and the theories of understanding. So I almost think at this point, there's no need to really go through it again, because we really did a whole board meeting about that, a whole section of the board meeting last week. So.
Okay.
Can I just ask, are there other significant things on the curriculum committee's agenda for the rest of the school year, or is that you guys are getting toward the end of the school year, so you're kind of wound up with your work?
I think
The next meeting is coming up in 2 weeks, and I believe from an administrative standpoint, and typically we propose dialogue about things that are forthcoming, so I would foresee dialogue in particular about the technology plan that's been evolving and that will be discussed at a future board meeting, but there haven't necessarily been other topics that we've added to the agenda as of yet.
Okay. So moving to the B&G committee, I'm the lone representative here because Maria's not here. A quick review of our minutes. We met on the 15th of April at 7:30 in the morning with Dr. Harrison, Ms. Miller, and Gary Knowles, and of course Maria and myself. We spend most of our time reviewing a proposal to turn the area around Dow's Lane, which is currently sort of, if you're going into the center entrance to Dow's Lane, not the main entrance, but the center entrance, where there's an exit there that's not like, it will become the formal entrance to Dow's Lane, right? That area to
the one that's literally closer to the lane that's called Dow's Lane.
Correct, yes. To the left of that, there's sort of a hillside that sort of slopes down into Dow's Lane. This area would become the Sarah Carnahan Outdoor Learning Space, and it would be landscaped in a way that would provide for learning opportunities for children. This was presented to Gary by Delina Cody, who is our kind of gardener expert, what the committee focused on is the feasibility of doing this, because of the upkeep of doing such a learning center might be a challenge, because if you're going to groom such a large area, that there might be a lot of different things that we have to do to look after it. And also, like, for example, some of the things that Ms. Cody recommended were not really truly deer-friendly plants, and so those plants would get quickly denuded. And I can't remember, the funding for this would come from what source?
From donations.
From donations, right.
Just one aside, I mean, you know, there is a definite process for naming rights in the district that we have to follow. So, I mean, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
But there is a.
We didn't discuss that, actually.
Yeah, you know, it has to, I mean, so really it's a question of, in the district, you get put forth before the board and they vote as to, you know, whether or not they want to name something after someone or not.
Right,
So,
yeah,
and
that's
hopefully
right,
we'll
right, because
follow
we had that issue, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, I'm all for it, sounds
Right.
great, but I just want to make sure that we follow our own board
Right.
procedures.
And apart from the buildings and ground part of this, have we had input from the school administration about whether it's valuable from an educational point of view to have this and whether this would be the best place to put it? I just wonder, it's close to the building and maybe a distraction to other
Right.
classroom activity.
There's been a committee that's been working on this over the past year, and it consists of school administrators, teachers, parents that are involved, and they have generated this proposal that was presented to the committee.
I see, so it really comes out of the education.
Absolutely. No, and, you know, aside from thinking about just the landscape of it, but there's a little stage area with an amphitheater that's going to be developed that would have opportunities for students for performances and the like. That would kind of be right outside of the library area.
Right, but it's adjoining the building, right?
Abuts the building.
Yeah, it's,
whatever the right.
you know where the garden is, the garden that was built a couple of years ago that's next to the building?
Not very well.
Yeah,
no, but
it's kind of, it's next to that.
By the field.
Yeah.
It's by the field.
Landscaping that walkway too,
Yeah, okay.
so all the way up to the sidewalk.
So our recommendation, the Buildings and Grounds Committee recommendation, was to proceed in steps. You know, to take it slowly and not to try to attempt the entire work all at once, because it's kind of a large space. And I don't think we actually got into the detail of what we should start with first, whether we should actually start with the outdoor
Gary
classroom.
was going to go back.
Exactly.
And because we had some questions on some of the plantings from a maintenance standpoint, as well as quantity.
Right.
So he was gonna go back and discuss a lot with her and then bring it back to the B&G committee.
I mean, is the purpose, you're building this to honor Sarah, essentially. So maybe we should, in the next meeting or two, then just get board approval to name something after her before we actually start doing the building. Just a formality.
We don't even have revised plans yet. so,
Yeah, but I just didn't want to break ground before we, just want to go through.
We're quite a ways away from that.
Presumably the merits of this, you know, I mean, it's a great, presumably is a good thing to have a memorial for Sarah Carnahan, but the merits of this presumably are educational, right? And then the question of what the appropriate memorial for her is a somewhat distinct question, I think.
Well, in their view, they wanted to have something that would reflect her sensibility also, as she was very much.
Which may well mean it's
She was a very outdoor-focused person. But I think the idea of having the discussion about approving, you know, her name makes sense, to be consistent with past policy. Then we talked about our capital projects, which no new news for this board and this those watching, because Dr. Harrison has been updating us since our meeting, but this was basically about the delay that we've learned about. So there's no new news there. And then we had a brief discussion about starting the Dow's Lane project. The project is targeted to kick off on July 1st, and this is the actual work, you know, to move the district offices and create the new space in the center of Dow's Lane to accommodate the current administrative offices.
How long do they think that project is going to take?
August 21st.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, that's close.
Yeah.
That
So,
doesn't leave.
so from July 1st to August 21st, right? From July 1st to August 21st. Yeah, for Dow's Lane.
Do we, hate to ask it, but do we have a contingency plan if their construction runs over time?
There are penalties if they run late in the RFP, so they will be really on target.
And then I have to say, in our construction meeting, the contractor has stressed that in reality, the scope of this project is not that big. And so they're going to have work that's going on in all areas at once, just to be efficient with their crew. But the focus is going to be primarily on opening, getting the Dow's Lane office space set up. However, if there were to be some delays, you have to think we have that latitude that they could remain in their current offices with some of the structure, and we just stay in the modulars until.
Right.
But I have to say that the contractor was extremely confident that they're able to get it done, and our architects have actually worked with them in the past, and they said they've always been right on with their timelines.
Great. And one last thing, did we talk about the 5-year plan? Because I thought you had said that we would be beginning the work on the next 5-year plan for, that's required by,
Yes, we will begin that work probably over the summer for the 15-16 year, 5-year facility plan. That's a good segue, because just today I finished doing the school report card facilities, which will be on the June board agendas, and I will be sending out copies of those.
And when do we get to participate in creating that 5-year plan?
During the summer.
During the summer.
That's what we already created the 14-15 year one.
Right.
Yeah, this report card is nothing to be creating.
No, I meant the 5-year.
5-year plan, don't you
Yeah.
need to have do you do an RFP?
Yeah.
For those services, for a 5-year plan?
The 5-year plan, no, we,
Look at two different things. One is
The
the
5-year
ongoing
plan-
maintenance plan
are
with
you
the
talking
state.
about the building condition survey?
No,
No, it's the 5-year plan.
5-year facilities plan.
Yeah.
that you
Yeah,
go-
that's called the building condition survey.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, every 5 years, you have to hire an outside architect to do
Right.
the building condition survey.
Right.
That's different than the 5-year plan.
I see.
Okay, I'm sorry. And yes, I've been in contact with BOCES to see if they are doing anything that we can participate in to get an architect that way. Otherwise, we're going to have to go out to bid for those services, because it'll probably be over $10,000.
Okay.
Okay?
And about what time do we expect delivery of the?
We're hoping to have
Early
that
September or
work
something?
done in the summer.
Yeah.
And then have the report September, October.
Okay. Because we were talking about that this weekend, right?
Right. But then the Buildings and Grounds Committee over the summer can also work on the 5-year plan to incorporate some of our ideas on work that needs to be done in that.
Yeah, one kind of informs the other.
Right.
Okay. All right, well, that's our Buildings and Grounds Committee report. And the next subject is the New York Suburban Coalition meeting that occurred on April 15th as well. And that was the New York Suburban Consortium for Public Education, I guess is the formal name. This is a consortium that has existed now for about a year and a half, 2 years?
No, it formed a little over 3 years ago.
3 years ago, okay.
Yeah, I attended one of their first meetings before I was officially employed in the district.
Bob Rollins.
Yeah.
Yep. And the guest speaker at this meeting, it was hosted at Ardsley. The guest speaker was Judith Johnson, who is our new regional regent on the Board of Regents. And she was very impressive. She has a very impressive CV. She worked in the Clinton administration in the Department of Education. And she is just a very thoughtful, considered woman. I think we are very well represented by her. She summarized, I'll summarize what she said her priorities are as a new incoming regent. Number one is assessing the Common Core. She obviously spoke very carefully about this. She is not opposed to the Common Core de facto, but she certainly has questions about the effectiveness of Common Core and how it's being measured, and what is actually happening in the classrooms, and that needs to be examined, is how she put it. She also said number two, and on her list of 4 things, was assessing the use of test scores to determine the growth and potential of students and the value, or I should say worth, of teachers. Sounds like language that she actually used. So what her concern is exactly what our concern has been, is that the testing at the moment has very little diagnostic value. And there was some joking in the room about the fact that the test scores are delivered at a time when there's nobody here to actually review them, and that whoever put this together didn't seem to understand that to bring people back from, you know, their summer vacations or whatever would actually cost districts money to review the test scores to make them diagnostic. So really, as we know, these test scores are really just to evaluate teachers, or primarily to evaluate teachers and to evaluate certain cohorts that we are serving in our district, but certainly not as a diagnostic tool in the way that we use our own assessments. And she asked the questions, are these even reliable or valid tests? So she's clearly asking many of the same questions that we're asking. Finally, she said that one of her goals is to correct the continued failure in this country to honor teachers as a profession. She really wants to make teaching an honorable profession, and she highlighted in how it is in some other countries where teachers are considered it's an honorable career choice and one that people desire to go into. And she thinks that that is something that she really wants to work on to correct. And then finally, she said focus on policy as opposed to politics. She was very clear in pointing out that she felt there was an awful lot of political work that was going into what should be policy work. And the fact that so many of these recommendations, so many of the new law was done at the last minute without consulting policy professionals, she felt was really supportive of that point of view. She did say something interesting about what we've been experiencing, which is some of the civil disobedience, people opting out of the tests. She made the point that it's fine to opt out of tests and to express your opinion about, you know, the value of these tests by actually not participating in them, but you have to know what you're aiming for. What is the new revised law? What are we asking for? What do we want changed? So that was actually a really nice segue into Louis Wool, who is the superintendent from Harrison, and he spoke at some length about some of the ideas that a group of superintendents has been coming up with that really are a retort to what, a response to what is in the law today. And I won't go through all of that right now because that would kind of keep me going for another 10 minutes here. But suffice it to say that some smart superintendents who understand what the general desire is of some of the features of the law, they have been thinking about how to change some specific elements of the law to make it more usable for school districts. So it's not just a kind of political club on teachers, it is a usable framework for helping schools to improve the quality of the education for students.
Was it an invite event?
I don't actually remember how I got the invite, because
they sent around an email that goes out to anyone that's a member of the group, and I don't know if it was sent to board members or...
I don't...
Is there a reason why not all the board members were told about it? Only some board members?
Well, Michael Hanna was there, so somehow Michael got invited too.
We've communicated some of the events in the past. There's no intent to exclude anybody here, Robin.
No,
it's
I kind
an
of
outside
just
group,
assumed that
and
everything goes to all the board members at the same time. I just never,
the
telling me
invitation-
about it, I'm like, God, it sounds great, you know, how'd you hear about it? He goes, I don't know, it kind of appeared.
Yeah,
So.
well, the invitation isn't coming from me. I'm not the host of the event, and oftentimes we do forward the things, but most times things don't come with, we get a return response, so.
Yeah.
I think I'm on this list, is how I got.
Is it possible they sent them to the presidents of boards?
I don't know.
I'm not certain.
But it's not, I mean, I guess it's, maybe it just goes back to the communication. You know, I mean, you asked for specifics. that's one thing that, if you're going to and you think it might be of interest to the board, then that's a great thing to circulate. I mean, last year we were invited and advised about the Lower Hudson Regional Information Center Tech Day, and I realized when I went up online to see when it was, I realized I had just missed it, and I guess maybe it's just a conversation we need to have about what kinds of things we want to be advised of and what we don't, but it's, it's nice to know what things are going on, because you guys do get a lot of stuff that if I've always want to know, like if there's a tech expo or things like that, and it would be great if it could be shared, so.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that there's value to that, and recognize that the communication is a two-way street, and that that I think we need to be mindful of establishing what the expectations are, because there is the desire from the administration to meet them. So I think clarity needs to be had.
All right, well, that's my report from that meeting. I'll share these notes. I, again, thought when Chris sent them around, he sent them to the whole board, but
She sounds like she's very well received, like people seem to think she's going to add value, and she seems to be
absolutely
welcome.
Well, and I think the most important thing is that she has a strong point of view that is backed up by experience, to know how things get done, and that experience has credibility. So she's not just a shrill voice, alone. She is absolutely comes across as a policy veteran who also has experience in schools, because she herself was a principal at one point, I think she said. Superintendent.
Say her name was again?
Judith Johnson. Okay, so that concludes our committee reports, and that moves us on to our policy reads. These are now policies that are ready for adoption, because we already had a public discussion of first read. I think we can kind of quickly move through these. I hope everyone has read the revised text, because we do have to adopt them tonight. And obviously, if anybody votes in opposition to any of them, since we don't have quorum, then we will have to table it, I guess. Does anybody have any comments on any of the policies, or should we just go through and vote on them?
The answer is I have no comments. I'm prepared to vote.
Okay, good. So can I have a motion then to accept the policy of purchasing, which is 6,700, and this also rescinds policy number 5410. Can I have that motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, that takes care of 9.1. Are these on the, no, we're doing them one by one, right? So I thought, it's not the consent agenda.
Do you need an individual motion for it, or could there be one that moves all of them?
If they're all going to get moved, sure.
Yeah, a matter of efficiency.
Yeah, okay. So can I have a motion to accept policies 6,700, 1530, do you have to, can I do it by policy number?
I'd say just motion for 9.1.
Yeah, 9.1 through 9.6.
We already did 9.1.
So, right, 9.2 through 9.6.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. So that takes care of our policies. And now on to our consent agenda, which is items, I won't even read all the items, but 11.1 through 11.7, 12.1, 13.1 through 13.8, and 14.1 through 14.5. I have a motion to accept the consent agenda for discussion.
So moved.
Okay, now we can talk about any of the specific items.
Yeah, I have not had the time to go through any of the minutes in full, so we have a lot. So I'm not prepared to vote for any of the minutes yet. I'm sorry that I didn't have time, but although there were a lot, I didn't even get to the
Right.
first one, didn't get through the first one, so it's not, obviously, it's partly my fault, but,
So you'd like to
I just
move
can't
to...
vote for them, so
Right.
then they can't pass.
Right, that's right.
So,
So we're going to
unfortunately,
table
I'd be happy to pass them if other people were here.
11.2 through 11.8. Does that mean I have to undo the consent agenda?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So can
sorry.
I have a motion to undo the consent agenda that we just passed?
So moved.
Okay, so let's table 11.2 through 11.8. And is that a motion to table? Yes, right?
Yeah.
Can I have a motion to table 11.2 through 11.8?
So moved.
Okay, so motion to,
Did anybody second?
oh, sorry,
So,
second. All in favor? Aye. And so our consent agenda now consists of 12.1 through
14.8, 14.5.
And 11.1.
Oh, and 11.1. Yep, 11.1, and then 12.1, 13.1 through 13.8, and 14.1 through 14.5. Can I have a motion to accept that revised consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
So, any discussion on any of these items? No? Okay. Then let's have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that concludes our meeting, unless we have any comments from our lone remaining community member? No?
I have a comment.
Yeah, I'll get to 16,
Oh,
don't worry.
okay, sorry.
Yep. And then lastly, our Board of Education discussion, any remaining comments that a board member would like to comment on?
Yeah, I just have a question, because I've gotten a few kids asking, and I don't know, is there, did we have a new policy on bake sales? Did we forbid all bake sales in all schools? Is that something that's happened?
You're making me, as a policy board member, guilty because the policy committee, because we have a pending wellness policy that kind of addresses this entire
Bake sales were basically stopped by the USDA, so that's why that policy changed.
I mean, I heard that, but then when I went on to read about it, it sounds like it's up to they gave some guidelines, and it's like, so it sounded like different states were adopting in different way in different districts. Like you might say, okay, we'll do 3 a year, or it didn't say you had to eliminate them entirely.
It says, yes, it said they're completely gone, except if the state allows waivers. New York State has allowed
New York State
0
does not allow
waivers. So
Okay.
there are no bake sales. The only bake sales, you are allowed to sell anything that meets the smart school snacks criteria as far as fat, calories, portion control, whole grain, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, and does that pertain to on-school property outside of school hours?
It pertains to on-school property a half hour before school starts up through a half hour after school.
Okay, so if like the Wizards come, that's exempt. They could
Yep.
do events, and that's
Right.
fine. Is it possible for us to get a copy of what the USDA
Certainly.
put forth?
Yep, I'll send it to you.
Thanks.
Okay. So can I have a motion to adjourn our meeting?
So,
Oh, I forgot the notice, sorry, for next meeting is the meeting notification.
The 19th.
Yeah, is the 19th, which is our annual election. And that is, again, from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Main Street School.
Sorry, is that right?
7 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Oh, that whole thing is considered a meeting?
No, I'm sorry, that's the vote.
That's the district.
That's the vote. We will be meeting at 9 p.m. I'm
That's the
sorry.
district meeting in
Yes.
some sense.
No,
No, but there's a
I'm a
term
little
for
tired now.
That would be a long meeting.
That would be a long meeting.
Like the long parliament.
Yes.
And we don't have one next Tuesday for the first time in, what, 5
I know,
weeks?
we've had many, many meetings. Our next meeting is after that, May 26th.
What am I gonna do with my Tuesday?
Yeah, just, you might be on jury duty during the day, right?
Yeah.
All in favor of adjourning the meeting?
Just as a reminder, if we can encourage our community members to vote.
They already did the motion.
I made the motion, Robin seconded it.
Right.
Had a voice vote.
I'm
sorry.
kidding. I didn't say a word.
Messing with me.
Second, done, goodbye.
You did say the word, some of this, right, sounds